Okay, it's episode 38 of Summoning Insight. I'm Thorin, usual host, freelancer extraordinaire, man on the grind, hustling out there, the hardest working man in show business. That's how Monte likes to refer to me. That's his pet name for me, actually. He also thinks of me as a young James Brown. Don't know why that is, though. My co-host here is Monte Cristo. He's that guy who, like, you guys get to see, like, on this show, and then, like, sometimes you watch IEMs, and then once a year you watch Worlds, and then you think, oh, that Monte guy's pretty good. I wish he was in LCS. But he's not. He's not, actually. He just does, like, the minor leagues off in Asia somewhere. Speaking of doing the minor leagues off in Asia, our guest this week is PapaSmithy. Now, I know what you're thinking. PapaSmithy. Oh, is that wrestler in the double? No, it's Papa Shango. That's not him. Good. PapaSmithy, though.
That's a deep cut. I appreciate it.
He did casting in LPL. Oh, wait a minute. LPL for scoring. No, that was last year. He did casting like a couple of years back. So he used to do it like in 2013, back when I know we all watched LPL. And now he does LPL again. And you're probably thinking to yourself, that still doesn't ring a bell. Who is that? You know, in every casting combo, okay, it always tends to go like this. This is the way it works in a top level casting like duo. The way it works is you have the one guy who's really charming. He's good looking, perhaps. He just has that likable, down to earth quality where he's that guy who could have been your prom king. You know, he's called the play-by-play caster, and you just love all his calls. You love those little things he inserts there. You know, it's the dinner bell's being rung and they're coming in for the tea fight. You know, all that sort of great work that they do to hype us all up. Because I personally couldn't get invested in watching the best players in the world play a game unless I heard people say kind of like cliched things over the top of it. That's what makes me erect. So in this sort of a duo, they then allow someone else to come in and be a part of the duo. And because like one side of like all the charisma is covered, they allow like a guy to be involved in every casting duo. I'm just teaching Monty about this because he doesn't know about this. They'll allow a guy who actually maybe his personality is actually repugnant. It's actually disgusting in some senses. Maybe even repulsive. Like he actively... Yep. As he explains his knowledge and his analytical side of the game, you actually start thinking, like, why do they even allow this guy? Oh, that's right. Oh, the play-by-play guy. Oh, I love that guy, though. I'm loving it. And then that dynamic, the push and pull, that kind of sexual charisma that they create is what makes you enjoy the cast. You have to have the bad guy, the good guy. You know, it has to work like that. Now, I know in Monty's case, it doesn't work like that, actually. He's got an extremely analytical play-by-play guy, and they fuse very well with their scripted material. And Monty is actually world-renowned for his lovable personality. He's, you know, children like him, animals are attracted to him naturally when he goes out to smoke pesticides on his balcony. So we've got one of those color casters I described before, one of those dark creatures that lives in the shade of the glorious light bringer that is the play-by-play caster. It's PapaSmithy from LPL. Hello.
I appreciate the hard sell, Duncan. It's feeling really good about myself. No, I'm well. Greetings to you.
Okay,
I'm enjoying your rotations, PapaSmithy, so I decided
I've just got to keep rotating while I can. Working in there.
Do you mean rotating by going from like working on LPL to not working on LPL to working on LPL again? And will this rotating continue?
Well, I mean, to be honest, remember, I was around before LPL, so it was like kind of like Chinese League of Legends, then a bit of LPL, then nothing at all, then LPL. And of course, you haven't even mentioned the Oceanic Pro League, which... I'm also
he's actually increased the frequency of his LPL, not LPL doing to weekly rotations.
That's true.
LPL and not LPL.
Well, listen, I apologize that I didn't mention the Oceanic Pro League. I just did it there, and there you go. That's you mentioned. Right, so moving on. You cast the LPL, ladies and gentlemen. So speaking about the LPL, let's just start in the past with PapaSmithy. Now, here's what's great, Monty. You know, I'd always in the past talked about potentially having Papa on the show. My whole concept was going to be we would go in depth on the history of Chinese League of Legends in front of this large audience that we have, a lot of people interested in history.
Absolutely.
And then what PapaSmithy thought he'd do, right, is go on another show that has like 10 viewers before, completely shoot his load to the extent he was just left a withered husk of a man in desperate need of IV injection of fluids and historical interest at that point in time, and then come to this show completely spent, about to roll over and go to sleep any second, and then tell us like he's up for all like love fest. Like that's the world we live in right now, Mike. So unless you've got some Viagra, some historical Viagra.
I don't agree. Because like for example, my introduction to you was your grilled interviews when you started doing them with the League of Legends crew. Because obviously I didn't follow a lot of esports outside of League of Legends, and like the first thing I took from you was that you always reference what other interviewers asked or like what the community was interested about. Like there has to be points from that, long segueing history of Chinese League of Legends that there's still things that interest you. I know you still have burning questions.
Well, luckily, I was kind of only being a bit facetious there, PapaSmithy. Okay. What really happened was they had you on this long talk show where they were going to. Froscorin tried her damn best. She had questions, and what happened was people spent 2 hours digressing, not answering her questions, and then repeatedly just passing everything over to Kelsey Moser, who is like the oracle and just knows everything. And she would just access the pure universal source of truth that I didn't even know humans could get to. But she can go beyond the human realm and biases, and she was just relaying the truth. And you all sat there like heathens, just hearing the word of the. You just sat there like ungrateful humanity, hearing the word of the Gnostic God, and just wondering why you were trapped in this body that you couldn't even truly understand it. You couldn't achieve true gnosis, Papa, but you tried. You gave it your best shot.
I did. I mean, like, if someone is such an oracle of knowledge, if someone knows all these things, and I'm trying to access memories that I half remember, like, why not just defer to someone who has?
I know that's what Monty always tells me. Yeah, that's the approach Monty takes on this show. I tell him, no, listen. I try to blow him up a bit, Poppy. I'm like, the show's about you, Monty. It's all just about you getting your knowledge out there. And then he's like, excuse, I'd like to say something about the comment. I'm like, yes, okay. Come on, I've got jokes coming up here. What the fuck? What is this? People don't listen for the analysis here, bro. So anyway,
it's all about the memes.
Speaking of analysis that people don't listen to, let's start actually back in your era in LPL.
Okay.
So when you had this discussion on China Talk, even though I referenced that there, it's not like we're just going to reference that like, oh, and I know everyone watched that. We're going to talk about some of these topics, but since for start of 2 of the 3 people in the conversation are different, it'll have a different flavor to it. So your era, when you started, was basically when World Elite had just begun that like streak of domination. Like they had the domestic streak where I think they won something like 33 best of 3 or something without a loss. And during that period, what international viewers will know is that they won IPL 5 and... yeah, that was the only big international one. Oh no, they won the World Esports Masters as well, which technically had some foreign teams. It had like Curse and it had Incredible Miracles. So okay, they won a couple of international tournaments. But what people need to realise about that streak is that it had the same lineup as at Season 2 Worlds when they made it to the round of 8. But they'd only just gotten that lineup when they went to Worlds there. Actually, famously, they changed the jungler and the support player, which was FCZF and ClearLove. And then it's kind of once this lineup got rolling is when they were like a very, very good team. So just give us initially your sense. If someone watching this show now, Papa, say they only started in 2014, or maybe they only saw the tail end of 2013. So if they even saw World Elite, they saw like kind of the broken down World Elite that was a bit figured out and its players weren't on their peaks anymore. Kind of just give us your sense of what was World Elite like as a team. Were they the greatest team ever? Where do they kind of place in history for you?
So like, I started casting actually World Elite when I covered the AEL Enter the Dragon tournament, which is a long-forgotten online tournament straight after Season 2 Worlds.
I remember
it was actually it was a competitive debut of the Katie Rolster Arrows and Bullets original rosters. Like I remember being told, I didn't even know that Katie Rolster was a famous esports organization. They're like, no, they've got a team now. They've got Ryu, I think he was #1 solo queue on the Bullets, on the B lineup. And I was like, the B lineup, does that mean that he's on the worst team? Like, this was all really new to me at the time.
Zero was on A at the time in mid lane.
Zero was on A, yeah. And A was actually the team that made it to the finals, but that tournament also included World Elite and Invictus Gaming.
And World Elite was on the other side of the bracket with Bullets.
Yes, that's correct.
So that's what they beat them in like I think the semis or the round of 8.
I think it was like best of 3s into best of 5s, all online, like you say. Thankfully, at the time, we had access to the Taiwanese tournament realm, so a lot more cross Asia tournaments happened. Obviously, we'll go on to like the Stars Wars League.
I feel like Foscorin now, but what about World Elite, Papa? You remember that team?
So World Elite, like the team that played there, like again, once they'd settled down with ClearLove and FCZF, like at Worlds, I felt like, at least what I remember of Season 2 was a big criticism. People were recognizing Wei Zhao for his individual skill, but in terms of grouping, like sometimes his grouping timings were a bit off. World Elite, basically as a team, okay, maybe it's go. I have a very segueing mind, but World Elite, they love to play for the late game. Like that was the first thing I really, and they understood wave manipulation way before that was like a big discussion point. Like you had Clement Chu on a previous episode, and his article about World Elite was really insightful. But they love playing long laning phase. They never had a lot of jungle pressure. Like they definitely didn't have a skirmish jungler like Diamond or any of the other top junglers in the time. They didn't have a lot of jungle pressure. They relied on their mid laner to really pick up the slack. Like Messiah played the Twisted Fate famously. That's what he's most known for. In later years when the team was falling away, he was playing that AP roaming Scion to try and create the same sort of pressure because they wanted jungle pressure. The jungle pressure came from the mid. The jungler farmed and they played really long laning phases. They would play jungle Zed, not take turrets just so ClearLove could come out of the jungle with multiple items. But it's the late game team fighting, I think, that is the real takeaway. They were the late game team fighting masters, and in a time when AD carries were at their peak of power in League of Legends, they had the best AD carry in the world by far, and Wei Zhao. Like Wei Zhao, then his Ezreal in particular was like, it was just unbelievable to watch, especially as someone who was new to kind of these teams. Like I'd seen them at Worlds, but like following them through online tournaments, big and small. Like World Elite were an amazing team at the time.
Monty, when I ask you about World Elite, and I now segue from what Papa was saying to set it up, when I tell you that their approach with their greatest team ever was they would have the jungler farm up as much as he could, and they would have the mid laner roam around the map and sort of like provide pressure, Now I realize to you that sounds like if we're in the 80s, the jokes about like Soviet Russia and the way like in Soviet Russia like a wrench like turns you or something, like it sounds like that sort of a joke, but I'm not actually being facetious here. I'm genuinely asking, what did you think of that team and that novel approach? I'll give them that. Okay.
I mean, it was an effective approach for a time. I think that we've seen that all of the very farm-heavy jungler teams, notably teams like World Elite, teams like Cloud9, haven't been able to hold it together for very long, just because it's not the most efficient way to play the game. When you have the mid laner losing a lot of farm, that's more guaranteed gold, where the jungler could be affecting the map in better ways, and especially there's a certain freedom in playing a lot of champions in the mid lane position. You can have a very broad champion pool, and you don't always want to play champions that can roam, but if your style kind of results in that, then you get locked into a pretty specific champion pool. Obviously, Messiah's Twisted Fate was fantastic for dealing with that kind of strategy, but I feel that it's more limiting and it does more harm than good, rather than having a traditional jungler who will gank when the jungle pool has always been about champions that can help secure kills. So I think it's impressive they made it to work as long as they did, but it's definitely not my preferred way of watching League of Legends, nor do I think it's an optimal strategy. And I've always been one of ClearLove's biggest critics.
So. We'll get to that. Don't worry, because you don't know the love that PapaSmithy holds for ClearLove. So we'll get.
I know. Oh, I do.
That was going to be the Oprah style reveal later, Monty. Stop spoiling the show. Okay, so that leads me to this question then. So first of all, before we go back to Papa, I want to get the baseline from Monty. If we're talking like greatest teams of all time in League of Legends, whereabouts are you roughly having World Elite? Like, I mean, it sounds from your description here like you'd maybe favour other teams that play a style you prefer, or maybe had more international success. Whereabouts would World Elite stack up for you, do you think?
No, I mean, I think you can't really. It was a relatively short time where World Elite was dominant, but I don't think that you can really not give them their due, considering their domestic success was just so incredibly oppressive. And so when you consider the just how successful they were in the context of China, and the fact that China was still a powerful region back then and did have that international success, then you have to look at them and say probably they're already top 5. I mean, just automatically.
Let me just point out, for context, I can sometimes, believe it or not, Monty, one of my skills is knowing when someone says something that might be taken differently by the audience. I know that you know that that's one of my skills. Now, when Monty says China was still a top region back then, he means like literally as in like they're a top region now and they were a top region back then. Don't take that as like, they were actually still a top region back then, before they fell off and NA overtook. I don't want, this isn't Monty from All Stars 2014. This is Monty now, where he's been beaten down by the world. He's had to accept certain facts about the excellent way that Chinese people play the game the wrong way and beat all the teams that he likes to play the game the right way. So, Papa, where do you have World Elite in the best teams ever? Do you actually have do you have more for them than
I think you have to put them third, honestly. Just after Samsung White and SK Telecom K.
I don't think like I don't think I would disagree with that list.
I mean, I don't. If you, obviously, I would like to put the KT Bullets higher than them, but I can't do that due to lack of international success and domestic success.
Oh, just that then, yeah. Oh, okay.
Hey, just because there's a camera guy in my shot now.
No, he's not actually on the screen, Monty. You betrayed show business. You're never supposed to comment on things like that, So okay.
Well, anyway,
the box is small.
As I talk about this, there's an IEM film crew in my house right now. So there you go, everybody in the show, in case you see.
I mean, they know all about the KT Bullets. What are you on about, Monty? They won one of the biggest international tournaments ever held in League of Legends.
Just because their rise to power happened concurrently with SKTK's did rob them of a lot of their thunder. It's true.
Sure.
But,
see, I thought you were going to go with the personal burn there and say that I was being facetious about KT Bullets winning that IEM because I watched it from a hotel room in the same city, but couldn't actually attend the live match. So I thought you were going to go with that one. So now I have to burn myself, Monty, just to get the joke in there. But anyway, continue on. So it sounds like Papa would have a similar scenario, like top 5, and then you can debate where, but top 3 potentially.
Yeah,
Probably.
I would definitely say top 3 as well, just because again, you read the articles. Like Monty obviously published a similar article to Clemens about the 6th man and the slow push. Like they were innovative in strategies that still influence League of Legends today.
Yeah, they were hugely innovative in terms of not only wave manipulation, but you have to remember too that it was about the time that they were competing. So this is pre-Worlds. But even when they were in Champions, a lot of the North American teams, talking to the CLG players who were in Korea at the time, World Elite is really credited for the development of the lane swap as well. Because I remember the CLG guys being like, when they would play against them or scrim against World Elite, they'd be like, what the hell are these guys doing? And it completely took them by surprise. So World Elite was very innovative in terms of what they brought to the metagame, and they introduced so many concepts that I think we take for granted at the professional level now, but which are still the most advanced concepts and the most advanced strategies within League of Legends to this day, and they were the progenitors of a lot of this.
On the topic then, when we're describing World Elite's context here, I want to get your thoughts on this, because I'm someone who, when I went back and rewatched the Season 2 quarterfinals, I actually feel like that's one of the most overlooked series in League of Legends history because, everyone knows the famous part that had to be fucking replayed over and over and it was like 8-hour delays. Yeah.
Semifinals.
That was semifinals.
Quarterfinals, mate.
Really?
Season 2 Worlds, CLGU played World Elite in the quarterfinals.
Quarters, that's right.
Okay.
Anyway, but feel free to argue with me on that. So when they played them in the round of 8, I mean, your specialty is like and stuff like that. Okay. So, when they played them in this round of 8, though, the most famous thing is the delays and the fact that CLGU won, okay? At the time, obviously, CLGU were kind of golden boys because in the Western scene, well, they were a Western team and they were going to the semis, and people will think of it the other way. They'll think, oh, well, CLGU almost beat Frost and they almost made the final, maybe they could have won. But actually, if you watch this series, it was incredibly close. Like, one of the games that got restarted, World Elite was actually winning at some point in time. So this is a series where it's one of the true series in history where you really can look at it and go, like, actually, both teams could have won this series, and then it sets up all these interesting questions of what would happen, that sort of thing. When they lost that series there, Papa, you're saying like their strength was this late game style. They wanted to kind of delay the game in that sense. Was that just the wrong opponent then? Because CLGU famously, that's the style they kind of pioneered to a degree. What do you think of that series?
I don't remember that series clear enough to really do it justice. Was it a lot of the same sort of CLGU picks, like the?
Well, here's the weird thing, was that in that series, when World Elite did get their leads, it actually tended to be quite early. They were quite aggressive early on there. So I always wondered, it was strange because it didn't actually look like the classic World Elite style, but they were actually, it was working for them at times,
I mean, the thing about World Elite is that, we pigeonhole ClearLove as like a herbivore jungler, and that, it was always Messiah making up for the jungle pressure. But ClearLove had his champions and had his days. He's always a hard name to really pin down. But his Evelyn, for example, when that came into the meta, he was an excellent Evelyn player. Maybe because Evelyn always had implied pressure, so maybe that kind of increased his base level pressure. And it was an invisible
jungler on the map. You can never see it in lanes unless it actually ganked, Papa.
But like literally, his Evelyn was pretty good. Like he wasn't just fun. Like there are games when, I mean, even during Worlds, like Kelsey, like used one of my tweets from Worlds in one of our recent articles. Like there are times when ClearLove looks like the jungler version of Deft. It's ironic that they're on the same team now, but like sometimes the amount of pressure he puts out from the jungle again, it kind of makes you question whether he really is a jungler. He takes smite, but on his good days, he's a jungler. On his bad days, he team fights late in the game. That's just kind of how he is.
Do you remember that series, Monty?
I'm not particularly clear on it. I do remember it generally.
Okay, well, let's skip that part. Okay, so straight into the ClearLove discussion. Now, Papa kind of set up there. You notice he was very careful in how he described it there. What he didn't do, Monty, was outline what we think of traditionally as the jungle role, what role a jungler should play within a team in like a perfect world, and then assess ClearLove in those contexts. Like he did say, yeah, he wasn't necessarily a good jungler in terms of ganking or whatever, but he set it up as though, basically, I think the discussion that Papa wants to have, Monty, if you talk about ClearLove, is not about ClearLove as a jungler, and is he one of the best junglers? It's ClearLove as a player who happened to be assigned to the jungle role. Now, what do you think on this? Because I've heard a lot of apologists for ClearLove using this line, Monty.
Yes, that's how I feel about it as well. Is that is the way you discuss him, because certainly his team fighting has always been very good, and there's no question about that. But the real question is, why do teams keep putting him in the jungle role? At a certain point, you feel like a switch to top lane would have been preferable just for him as a player, because it seems like this guy who team fights so well could do even better with more resources. And so that's kind of the big mystery to me as to why he was never shunted into another position per se, especially given a lot of the numerous team changes he's made, the numerous changes on the World Elite roster over the years. So where do you really go with that? It's very interesting that hasn't happened.
And it was ironic that when the EDG change happened, and obviously ClearLove and FCZF went to EDG, the early mail was that it was going to be FCZF, using his ability with skill shots and aggressive. It's like to pick aggressive supports and moving to mid lane. That was the one role change that was long rumored to be happening. But I agree, and that's kind of like my big question with World Elite as a team, like where it sits in like the lists, is that they were so innovative and they did do things that still inform today, but they fell off. Like they had no answer to OMG and their pick style, and you have to think, where does the innovation come from? Was it Wei Zhao? Was it Coach Aaron, who of course is held in really high regard? But they had their styles and they developed it, and IPL 5 was like the crowning jewel, like when their style was at its peak. But the moment things changed and the moment teams started to approach the game differently, like they just ran out of ideas strategically. So, I mean, ClearLove himself in 2013 was really unimpressive during the LPL. Like, he did not make a lot happen outside of Evelyn. So it's probably an apologist way to look at it and be like, he's like a team fighter, but
if we take another jungler and we talk about somebody like Meteos, who during his first season did have that farm heavy style in the first season that they were in the summer, but after Worlds, when that failed, he really changed his style and his identity. And certainly ClearLove has dimensionalized. I don't think it's fair to him to say that he's just maintained the same style throughout his entire career, but it's still much closer to what it was. If we compare Meteos now to Meteos then, and ClearLove now to ClearLove then, there's a much bigger gap in the Meteos spectrum than the ClearLove spectrum.
I think you're inarguably correct. I guess the only constant ClearLove's had is the same coach since, of course, he's had FCZF as a support his whole professional career as well. I'd say that now his current play in 2015 has been a marked change from his days in 2014 and previously. Like, he has been able to play higher pressure champions. Okay, there are games when he and Deft run around on Jinx Nunu taking turrets and it feels like good old times, but he is putting out
the webcams have gone
pressure
off and it's killing me now. Can everyone try turning them back on and off again? What were you saying about ClearLove then, his Nunu jungle?
I was mentioning that there's times when they play the Nunu Jinx comps, like ClearLove and EDG have gone back to those even with the role changes, and it plays a lot similar. Like ClearLove, at least the thing you can say about his Nunu is that at least with Nunu you can disrupt a very skirmish focused jungler, go in their jungle, double sightstone with your support and kind of make a Vi more predictable and accountable, like and counter and smother the enemy jungler rather than actually creating pressure yourself. So like Nunu Jinx, that works pretty well for EDG, but yeah, I mean, in general, his level of pressure has increased. And I don't know if that's the role swap or Deft or the new kind of Korean players on the team, but ClearLove looks a slightly different player this year.
The thing is, when you talk about that, like someone having a radically different style like that, I feel like on one hand, I do like it in a way. Like it impresses me when someone can essentially succeed with unorthodox approach, even to like the fundamentals of the game. Like this is the role of jungle, and you can do it differently. So I was impressed when Meteos was able to do it in NA, because you think to yourself, well, we imagine traditionally you should be able to shut that down in very obvious ways, like early game, or counter jungling them, whatever you're going to do. But it's worked at different points in times. Meteos in NA, we're talking about ClearLove now. On the other hand, when Monty says that Meteos changed that style, part of the reason he had to change it was he was essentially repeatedly shown in international competition like this isn't going to work. Like your team won't win, and so that's something we have to change. Now, ClearLove wasn't necessarily shown that because first of all he had like one of the top 5 players of all time carrying from a different role on the other side of the map, who maybe didn't need ganks all the time, and so. How do you weigh that up, Monty? Because on one hand, I think it's actually quite admirable that you can have such success playing a different style in that sense. But what do you think of this aspect of the fact that he didn't have to? And then right after that, he got Name as well. So,
well, I think that
so what happened
was who was the threat on the team at that time and who was the focus of the competition. Because at that time, really in NA, people were trying to shut down Meteos. I mean, he was the major threat on Cloud9. I think that Balls and Sneaky kind of hadn't come into their own yet. And even today, you don't consider Balls and Sneaky the same level of threat that you would consider somebody like Wei Zhao and Messiah. So when there are so many resources on the enemy team dedicated to Wei Zhao as opposed to dedicated to Meteos, there's a lot higher likelihood that ClearLove has a chance to succeed. If his lanes can play safe or Messiah gets TF and he can make plays on the map, well then that's going to be much more of the enemy team's focus. And so it's just, I think it's a matter of who the enemy team is concentrating on and what their strategies are against you to try and shut down the major threats. And I think that's really the main point of differentiation.
I mean, you're also looking at who is the personnel on your team. Like, I often make this point when we discuss players that I don't think should be on a certain team. Like, I used the example of Wicked last week, where I didn't say that he shouldn't be a professional player and he can't play top lane, but I thought he should play it for a different team. So he should play his style. His style might be wrong for Elements, but it could be right for himself in a different team.
Sure.
In the same sense, maybe part of why it works, at least in World Elite, is because, yes, ClearLove isn't doing this pressure gank style, but Messiah also isn't doing a traditional mid style. He's actually doing this high mobility mid style, lots of roaming. In a weird way also, isn't there some parity between the two of them? Isn't there some balance in the sense that neither wants to play the traditional role? Because if I think of the era when World Elite came up, that was the era when all the mids were the godlike farmers. It was the like Froggen, Ambition, Alex H. I mean, I expect it wasn't really on there, but it was these sorts of players. So actually, maybe even it makes sense to have a different look to what the mid lane is going to do on your team, because there's no point just having one of your best players essentially have to go up against players who might be better than him at this a thing that's not his strength. What do you think on this topic, Papa?
I think you have to also remember that, again, we're mostly talking about Season 2 and the introduction to Season 3, like before LPL times when, around IPL 5, when World Elite was at its strongest. You have to remember that globals were also a lot stronger back then, and like World Elite were known for their use of globals. They had great team communication, which is why they were so good in the late game team fights. But even in the mid game, we did often see ClearLove play Nocturne. That was probably the champion he was most synonymous with. And Nocturne, this was like after one Nocturne nerf ult, so of course it wasn't the massive jump, like gap closer that it was on release, but it was still on a shorter cooldown. Like, they were excellent at comboing global ultimates, so maybe that kind of helped them have a more of a farm heavy style, because of course you could always ult in if someone was out of position. So they were great with their communication and timings, and they were great and they were innovative with their strategy. But the moment that the pick League of Legends came through, specifically OMGs, get those outer turrets down and put down wards, that was so at odds with WE's keep turrets up and farm. And history has shown that pick League of Legends has been much more of a realistic and forward-thinking strategy, and being reactive in League of Legends now often will lose you games. Like, it happened to World Elite, it happened to their contemporary, as you pointed out, CLGEU, that if you play reactive, teams are just so much better and develop so many more strategies around snowballing a lead compared to when World Elite was at their peak. Everyone could farm, you could show up with 3 items out of the jungle, a team fight, and it wouldn't be a problem.
Monty, if we're going to talk about ClearLove as a great player and where his historical context is, I feel like I should relay some information to you that I don't know if you missed or not. I always like to, I'm that bad friend, Monty. You know when you have a group of friends and there's the one friend where someone else in your group, okay, maybe there's something about them that would be a little uncomfortable to all of you, but you just try and put it out of mind. You try and pretend you don't know it's there. I'm the friend who brings it up, like, yeah, but he likes Transformers 3 or something, like, and I can see the way it gets to you, okay? So we all love Kelsey Moser, we love Froscoren, we love these China Talk people, and we respect them as people with their own perspectives, bringing their own world. Now, if I was to tell you, Monty, that they thought to themselves, that top 20 of all time list that Thorin did, we could do our own one of those. So they sat down, they had a little think tank, a meeting of the minds, and they went over who should be in their top 20. And while they were throwing out names like Shy, who didn't make the cut, I'm afraid, my friend, they managed to get ClearLove in there. ClearLove was in their top 20 of all time. What do you think about this, Monty? How do you feel?
There was no Xiao Mei, Monty. Don't worry about it. Xiao Mei, I don't think made the top 20.
How do you feel about ClearLove making the top 20 over Shy? By the way, just gonna put that out there. Over McNoon, just gonna put that out there. What do you think about this, Monty? How would you verbalize your feelings?
Horrible. I can't even comprehend why that would happen.
Where in your world would you have someone like ClearLove ranked if you had to? What kind of range would be more reasonable for you? Just as a player, it doesn't have to be jungler, remember, just as a player in League of Legends history.
God, I don't know, after 30?
Life's hard after 30. ClearLove, the ClearLove story. Okay. So
after 30 to 40, 40 to 50 maybe? I don't know. I don't have that list. Definitely not top 20, that's for sure. I think that you have to put him maybe like in the 30s somewhere just because of his number of accomplishments and the fact that he's done very well on EUG also. But certainly I wouldn't ever, if we think about the rosters that he's on, you don't point to them and say ClearLove is the most prominent member of this team. He is the reason why they're winning.
Papa, I want to ask you, before I ask you to respond to that.
And by the way, it's coincidence that somehow ClearLove got 80 carries in their peaks, the most dominant 80 carries in China in their peaks. Na Mei and Wei Xiao.
Papa, who are you thinking of in terms of like, would he be in your top 20 if you had to mentally sculpt on now? Do you think he could make the cut?
Look, he definitely wouldn't be top 10. He might scrape into top 20. I think like you always have to weigh up intangibles with just success, right? And
Let's do that.
I remember after Worlds, like, people talk about Loop, right? You're always reticent to like be like too results oriented and be like, okay, he had other carries on his team, and that's fine as an argument. But like if you literally like your article on top 20 listed ClearLove's achievements, would it be the most LAN wins of all time in League of Legends? Probably. Okay, he attended more than anyone else probably as well, but his list of accomplishments is incredible, and it's not like I'm not going to say FCZF's one of the top 20 players of all time or anything, but ClearLove was a defining force for...
Why not though?
FCZF's such a strange player.
He has an identical accomplishment list.
Absolutely, he does. He did follow ClearLove. I just think... you look at ClearLove and people just don't notice things about him. Like his kill participation numbers are really, really high. Like his team fighting is always been excellent. There's a reason why World Elite made strategies around his ability to team fight, because he was always really good at it. And it's peeling on champions like Nunu. Obviously those champions have kids for it, but his mindset was always protecting for 80 carries. So okay, you can be like, okay, it's fortunate that he played with excellent ones, but there's a reason he's lasted so long and been relevant, even though his style does harken back to...
Yeah, it obviously has nothing to do with the fact that junglers in China have typically been terrible.
Okay, look, you can bring that up, and that's probably look. When Illusion was kind of his like big rival, and Illusion
exactly. Come on, let's get real here. Has there really been competition?
Let's say.
See, Monty, I had the joke for you here. I had my own sort of... I'm going to call it like #Kelsey Moser shower thoughts. So I had my own kind of Kelsey Moser shower thought, which is, what if, Monty, ClearLove was such a great jungler that the other junglers knew it was pointless to try and actually like counter jungle him and try to gank, because he could have just got there and shut them down. And so they thought to themselves, like, our only choice here is to like just stay away from the guy, like, just don't give him free gold kills and give him free kills. So we'll just let him farm it. What if he was so advanced that he kind of like outthought them in the metagame, Monty? What if that's what was really happening? You hadn't thought of that, had you?
Can I come in? I do have one point to make. Let's go from two different schools of thought. Let's talk about old World Elite and be like, okay, so why did he get away with late game farming? Remember, they love TF comps, and the one thing you can say about TF is that he kind of, I mean, even just in terms of like, okay, he can make ganks and the jungler doesn't. Like, let's not be reductive. Like, if ClearLove ever wants to make a decision, if there's ever a rotation that needs to happen, say a jungler invades him, TF is always the first to respond to either an aggressive move or a defensive move because he has a global. So you could say, okay, maybe they were just really smart in minimizing his deficiencies. So that would, you know, weigh against ClearLove and rating him in the top players and say, okay, he was good, but he was limited and he had to be comped around. But then you fast forward to EDG, like, that's a very different team. And he is doing good things in it. He's doing things he hasn't done before. So I don't know if it's a question of the personnel or the coaching or whatever, but he's been comped around and now he's actually coming out of his shell and playing both the supportive vision heavy junglers. And then like week 5, you know, he's playing Hecarim and changing his style completely on 5.2 and going for more carry-oriented champions. And of course, 2015, to counter your most recent point, the jungle pool in China is not awful now. It is strong.
It is vastly improved this year. That is
yes, sure.
I have a general point that you've kind of touched on there I want to bring up then, because I want to get Monty's take on this. In general, if you look throughout League of Legends history, the teams like we're talking about here with Cloud9 when Meteos was just farming, in general, I get the sense Monty doesn't like that approach in general, as in if there's an ideal...
I talked about how I didn't like that earlier in this episode.
Yeah, but in general, if there's like an ideal way to play the game, Monty thinks of like you should aspire to the ideal. You should look at like what the ideal is telling you is the game is telling you how it should be played at this point in time to be the most successful. So actually, I don't know if anyone's ever verbalized this, because I don't think they have, but most of the time that people criticize teams that don't play the natural style of the game would seem to be the most successful, it's often criticized as if those people had a choice and they've made the choice not to do it. So you think of like when Blaze and Shield were just playing those super late scaling comps and that's all they would do. CLGEU, etc. I don't think any of these teams who play unorthodox styles like this actually did choose. I think that what happened is, with their natural strengths, what they can be the best at, that's just the only way they could make it work. It's basically like in a weird way, kind of a band-aid to make their style fit okay. If you really wanted to play the ideal style, you'd probably have to change some personnel, chop it up, put a different player here, maybe even have this guy learn how to play a less effective style for him, but more for the team. Instead, I feel like these super late game comp style and all the rest of it, that would never be anyone's first choice. That's a reaction to it. Like, okay, well, we're losing now, so fix this a little bit, make it work. Like, supposedly, to give you an example, supposedly the reason why EDG developed that late game style is that they used to practice against KT Rolster arrows. And then they used to just get dumpstered so early that their coach used to tell them, right, next practice, just try and last another minute. And so all they learned to do was extend the game. And obviously everyone else in their region also was playing quite aggressive. So this helped, it worked within their region, okay, make them successful. But it was never going to make them the best team in the world. But then you'd also look at that team and go, well, they couldn't have played Samsung White Style and been the best in the world. They probably would have been less successful. So what do you think on this topic, Monty? Because on one sense, I can see that there's a merit to it. But at the same time, in a weird way, it is kind of banded because you're never going to be the best team also if you don't play the ideal style for the age.
And that's the thing, is that at that point you have to say, okay, we can get by maybe for the rest of the season, but then you have to start seriously looking at roster changes or some really fundamental changes to the way you play the game, and you have to retool it after that, because otherwise you're just going to be stuck in this cycle of having to basically either wait for the meta to move into your favor, which you never know if it's going to do, or you have to, like you're saying, the Band-Aid fix is there, and you have to react strategically every time and try and play in a niche way that people are going to be able to figure out how to counter.
Thoughts, Papa?
I think World Elite in China definitely did have a similar trajectory that you're explaining. Like World Elite, again, King's a late game, we can say that. And when the LPL opened up, OMG brought out, taking out the outer range of turrets, playing those really big pick supports, the Chinese freight train that was coined, the Hecarim, Thresh Graves, and the map rotations. And World Elite, basically before this point, World Elite, other teams have been trying to out-late game them. Like that they really were, other teams were trying to fight late game team fights against them. It was only OMG that kind of showed something strategically. And the Chinese meta has always been insular, so it took a long time for a team to come along like OMG, try something different, and then everyone played OMG style or tried to ape from it, and World Elite had no answer. 2013 was an awful year for them, like obviously culminating in them breaking up as a team. Then subsequently EDG rise up. They're able to extend the games. That they kind of figure out the pace that OMG is playing at and the pick style. And again, things change. But China has always been insular with their meta, so that's why I feel like they've always been the most nebulous in terms of international performance, because it's always been about beating the best team in China. It's never really been about tooling your team up to be competitive on the world stage until maybe there are so many Korean imports, and obviously those Korean players have gone there for pay, but also for the chance to win worlds. So I have to think it's only now in 2015 that the Chinese meta is looking more towards. And look, maybe you have a counter argument to that, but
I'm just saying. I think that out of the scale of chance to make money versus chance to win worlds, if they really wanted to win worlds, probably would have stayed in Korea.
Okay, look, then that's fair. But like, I think Deft and Pawn want to win worlds.
I agree.
On EDG. Like, obviously you can point to players and be like, "Yep, they're earning their bucks." And you can look to Spirit and say, "I'm really your team, man." Like, Spirit is the one who's definitely had the most to work against. But finally, World Elite looking a little bit better this last weekend. I think you probably agree. I know you saw some of their games. Like,
yeah.
And even Dade looked interested this week. So that's something. Like, there's still hope. It's a 44-game season. I think we always have to return to. Like, I don't know. I think there are players there that are definitely there for a paycheck, but...
Yeah, but that's the thing, Papa. I know that even though it's horrible for Spirit, it's like that Woody Harrelson gif of him like wiping his tears with the $100 bills. He's like, "Oh, so hard to live this life." Okay, anyway, so to return to you, I know, listen, for scoring, I get you. Like, I feel like I relate to you now. We're going to have a great conversation on our show, Incoming Aggression, because what you do is you say something to PapaSmithy, and then he says to you, like, yes, politics in the 18th century. I mean, the thing you have to understand about Antarctica was, it was started back in the Neolithic times and then eventually you thought, did he ever actually get to the part about, and it's like, as I was going to say,
could you please stop hiding my mystique here? This is kind of my thing.
So, to return to the topic of ClearLove, you brought up an interesting topic, but one that was curious in how you phrased it, where when you were kind of addressing that, okay, accomplishments-wise, he's going to be one of the best players because he's got this long stretch, especially because Chinese players play so many LANs, and he's had so many wins there, because obviously he has all the World Elite era, all the EDG era. These are the two most dominant teams from the region. His accomplishments are fantastic, but then what I don't understand is you weren't entirely like clear on this, but when you used the example of Looper and to suggest what someone like my counter argument would be, which is like, well, yes, but you have incredible players on your team, okay, you're not quite as important to the win as that. What I don't get about that is the way you referenced it made it sound as though like you don't entirely buy into that, because the reason I say that is because to me Looper is the most extreme example of that, where you've got someone that has a fantastic accomplishment list, and yet I think a lot of people, if you had to divide up who was the most important, would have him at the bottom of the hierarchy on that list. He had 4 players that were better than him. It's not that he was the 3rd best on his team, and can we argue whether he was as important as the 2nd? He was 5th for most people, and yet he has the accomplishment list. So that almost makes it sound like you don't think that's a valid argument.
Look at ClearLove's career too. He bounced around from Messiah Weizhou FZZF to Dame FZZF to Deft and Pawn.
But you would never say he was the 5th best, most important player on his team. He was always around.
Well, Chow Mei was terrible, so yeah, there's that.
Like, the only reason I bring up, because like people, you'll have that argument where you're like, okay, well, Pawn was the benefactor of 4 amazing players. Like, he only needed to be workmanlike in the top. I would argue that, like, ClearLove was never the 5th most important player on his team. Like,
you meant Looper there, by the way. You said Pawn, but I know you.
Oh, sorry, I meant Looper. Absolutely, yeah. So, like, Looper was definitely the 5th most important player on his team, and like, I understand that, but like, ClearLove was always around a 3 or 2, and his team would go to the extent of like picking around his ability as a player, which, look, it's very hard to rate ClearLove, but his 2015 especially has been very impressive. Like, he hasn't been as limiting. He hasn't been showing his 2013, 2012, 2014 style, and he's been opening up his styles. And
I agree with you. I mean, he's 100% on Lee Sin this season so far.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why I think this is an interesting topic, though, Papa, is because in talking about ClearLove, here's the problem: if you bring on these Chinese experts, Monty, and you talk about Wei Zhao, we're just going to be agreeing all day. Wonderful player, things he innovated, it's so great. Talk about Wei Zhao, it's going to be like that. Talk about Messiah, we might start to have a few disagreements. Talk about ClearLove, now you're getting an insight into the mind of someone who watches China's League of Legends, someone who appreciates it, someone who's different than us, Monty. They have other cultures there. In their culture, it's considered polite to burp after you've eaten a meal. That says that you've enjoyed the meal. In ours, that's quite rude. We consider that quite, like, burlish. Anyway, on this topic of ClearLove, the reason why I bring this up, PapaSmithy, is because here's the problem with me. Like I described there, talk about Wei Zhao, and I'm on board with everyone. I think he's amazing. I had him as like my second best player of all time. I had him probably higher than some other people would. Maybe some other people would have Mata that high. I had Wei Zhao, I've got no problem with. But before we even get to ClearLove, I'm already going to start arguing with you over Messiah. I feel like the people who love Chinese League of Legends boost him a little too much, okay? But I can understand, okay, second best player on one of the best teams ever. Clearly he has some merits that maybe I don't appreciate as much. Now the problem is, if you guys start going to a third member, now I've got two questions to ask. One, you're now having 3 members of this one team in like whatever top 20 type lists, which is already like, well, that's pretty startling right there. You know, some people only have one person on that list, 2 people on that. You've got 3 already. And now I have to start wondering, well, if this guy's so great, well, how great was Messiah? You know, like, how do I balance that aspect up? How do you balance it up in your mind?
The only point I'll make is that I'm talking about order of importance, not necessarily order of, like...
Yes, okay,
I don't actually rate Messiah as a top 20 player of all time. I think he was an excellent role player. Like, I think what he did in the context of the team, like what he was required to do, i.e. cause the jungle pressure his team didn't have from the jungle, he did fantastically.
Okay, but you can say that because it's easy to say that at that peak. Remember that time in World Elite's history where he was so easily banned out, and then he had to start playing Boots of Mobility Scion mid to have any pressure on the side lanes whatsoever, and they looked absolutely terrible. Like that was, you see the strength of that strategy when we talk about IPL 5, but it's actually very interesting to see the total disintegration of that strategy over time.
A World Elite
to when it went like
was depressing to watch.
People got so good at countering them that it got increasingly desperate and then ended in this train wreck that was like mid Scion.
Look, you are 100% correct. That was the sad thing, was that they were so pigeonholed on getting to late game and so pigeonholed onto ClearLove farming up that they did have to go the desperate lengths of Boost Mobility Scion. And apart from one amazing game, that the Volda Bear Scion game that was just hilarious and amazing, and they tried to recreate and failed miserably. You're correct. And that was definitely peak League of Legends and OMG style coming to the forefront, and World Elite having no idea what to do against it.
So that's the thing that makes it interesting, because when you have the Messiah discussion, it actually brings up some interesting factors to how World Elite was so good. Because think of it this way, Monty. If this guy, well, obviously in latter days you could ban Messiah out, but even in the early days, eventually it became obvious that you have to ban his Twisted Fate, because he was exceptional on that. He pioneered a lot of the things that people did with Twisted Fate in terms of the card counting and all that stuff. Shouts to my boy Jackson. So he was obviously incredible there. So eventually you had to ban Twisted Fate because you don't want the second best player of this really powerful pick, okay? Well, first of all, that means either you're having to waste the ban on the second best player, which then means that this godlike AD carry who plays minimum 3 godlike champions is definitely getting one of them this game. So you have to pick your poison there. So either he got to play his Twisted Fate and people just had to deal with it, or they had to give something up to Wei Zhao. So actually that's another example of how you can balance out people's weaknesses with the strength of someone else when it overlaps. I always say this when you're building teams, you know, it's not so much that you can't have a weakness, it's that someone else has to sort of cover it with their strength, you know. And if in an ideal world, like a Moscow 5 type world, you can cover it to the extent that people might actually think that Darian's like a god of the top lane. Like, he isn't in any possible sense, you know. But you can think that because of what happened with the way they were able to play. So on this topic then, if we talk about what came after World Elite, well, a lot of people unfortunately don't know this, Papa, because if they only watched IPL 5, you have to be... I'm not being like condescending when I say this. There's people who only watch the international Western tournaments, okay?
Sure.
So if you only watched IPL 5 and then you watched Season 3 Worlds, you wouldn't know who OMG is. Like, they would be this team who had one good game against SK Telecom. I guess they lost to Royal. Who cares? Royal were obviously the better team. You've missed essentially their whole time when they were the best team and how they took over and changed the meta of League of Legends in China. So give me, you kind of touched on it already. What did they bring that kind of, because what's interesting is their style actually was the counter to the World Elite style. And I've always said, historically, the greatest teams tend to work that way. What happens is, during the time when a team's the absolute best ever, part of why you can be the best is also how your opponents play against you. So often when you're the best, your opponent will try and ape what you're doing, but they won't be as good as it because you're the best ever at that. Usually the actual person who replaces you as the best is the hard counter to you. But nobody's tried that, or nobody's thought that, or nobody's got it to work. So what was OMG in reference to World Elite?
So again, like we'll preview what OMG became, but before it was keeping turrets up, farming out for late game, really long games, like 40-minute plus games. That was the norm in China. And again, other teams would try and out World Elite. They'd play long games. They didn't have any kind of strategies to beat World Elite. That's what they were oppressively strong, to the point where when the LPL was announced, people were like, well, this is going to be boring. It's either going to be Invictus Gaming or World Elite 1, 2, 100%, and nothing else will happen. Like that was the conventional wisdom at the start of 2013 when you're talking about the Chinese, LCS or the LPL, obviously is known. And then OMG came through. There was a lot of buzz about them. Like there was definitely some buzz. But the one thing they showed again was the importance of taking down those early turrets. We always told like the mid turret, the OMG turret, because they'd get down the mid as fast as possible, the outer rung. They'd rotate their AD carry. So they go for lane dominating champions like Graves at the time, take down this outer ring of turrets and move their vision forward, and then contest basically every neutral buff on the map. But they'd always have wards on your red buff, your blue buff. They'd have Blitzcrank from Pomelo at the time, and just try and get picks and take advantage. They were always about taking as many advantages as possible early enough.
Not only that, but I mean, you have to ask why this style developed. And in ClearLove's very low gank style, it becomes safe to apply pressure across 3 lanes because or you assume he's not going to gank you, and if you get wards deep enough as well. And the other thing that OMG did, I mean, you referenced this earlier with the Hecarim picks and the Graves picks and all these champions that could dash over walls, was they started initiating these 5-man like roaming gank squads and diving everybody under their turret. And basically you can just do that on the opposite side of the map of ClearLove because he just isn't putting out any pressure whatsoever. So if you continue to keep the lanes up, it's easy to group and dive under a turret. And my theory is that this is how we got through 2013 and 2014, these very team fight oriented early game skirmishing from the Chinese players where kills and team fighting was so emphasized, was because when OMG was dominating World Elite style doing this, the counter is that when the other team makes an aggressive tower dive, you have the advantage because they're diving your tower. So then you start to group up and just like start focusing on the team fights at every possible opportunity. And that kind of spiraled out of control and ended up in this like wacky team fighting Chinese meta that still persists to a certain degree to this day.
Papa, do you see like kind of the way he describes it there? He's very careful with his language, okay? He's couching things and using these interesting terms which to you or the audience, maybe they sound entirely innocuous. You just say, oh, roaming gank squad. They would try to apply pressure in this certain way. They were very orientated on this aspect. Like, to me, I hear the sort of distaste in this. The sort of, to me, the most distaste, like sort of disapproving phrase Monte ever uses is roaming gank squad, because I don't believe Monte thinks that a roaming gank squad is a good idea within the game League of Legends.
It's certainly not the optimal way to play the game.
So let's talk about that then. What is the difference to a naive Westerner who hasn't watched much Asian League of Legends? Oh, so you mean they group up and they try and like get kills? Isn't that what SK Telecom did with their pick comp style, Monte? Isn't this the same thing that you loved? Like, what is different from what you were liking about aggressive teams that have mid-game pressure and this gank squad style? What's different? What don't you like that much about it?
SK Telecom relied on Faker and Piglet mostly to create 1v1 outplays while applying pressure across the map. The issue is whenever you form up to have like this 5-man death ball on the map is that you can only be in one lane at a time or in one place at a time. Ergo, there is always counterplay in more locations than when you're putting pressure on. And if you do not succeed in getting a kill, you basically fail and give up a ton of map control. So it's high risk, relatively low reward in my opinion.
Papa, what do you think?
I think Monty's right. It's just that the teams that were leading the way in China, people would always react to how, and like he says, like people would react to the 5-man gang squad with, all right, we need to rotate our members there early so that we can have an early 5v4, 5v5, whatever. It wasn't let's take turrets in other lanes. It wasn't 1-3-1 and other kind of strategic options. They were just doing their best to use the knowledge they had of this is what's going to happen from OMG to try and outdo them at what they were already doing.
And I think that's a great point that you make, that it wasn't 1-3-1. How a Korean team would respond to that is when you apply pressure in one lane, applying pressure in two lanes. Yeah. How the Chinese responded was by all laning in the same location.
Exactly. It would be a 4v4 or 4v5. Maybe the AD carry would stay bottom to pick up farm because they could get to the late game AD carry phase. Like, unfortunately, China, like, there was always these big innovations. Like, we have to really credit for World Elite for the sixth man, for, as you say, the lane swap to some degree. We have to credit OMG for really pushing with the picks. And like OMG, to their credit, like even after the death squad had kind of fallen away, like when I started casting LPL Summer, it wasn't the freight train. It wasn't as much of that kind of play, but it was still, they were excellent at overwarding the enemy jungler, making sure that you had access to no resources whatsoever. If they ever got your outer rung of turrets, suddenly your wraiths, your red buff, they were all gone. And if they got all 6 turrets, nowhere on the map was safe, and they were always ready for a pick. So they were excellent at pick League of Legends, but in terms of like the death squads and other like exploitable things on a world scene, people were able to some degree to kind of work them out.
I mean, that phrase is even worse, Papa. Death squad. I don't think at any point in time will roaming death squad ever be considered a positive term. Like, oh great, is there a roaming death squad coming to town? Oh great, awesome, yeah. And I'll stick around for that. That's even worse than like gank squad, man. But I've got an abstract, because what we're talking about here is not just OMG. We're essentially relating it to an abstract concept of how should the game be played, or how ideally would it be played. So allow me to wade in and potentially ruin everything with my bronze knowledge of the game here, Monty. So if you think about how to play the game in this particular sense, the notion we're really talking about here is prioritizing kills over farming and then eventually creating a favorable team fight directly later in the game, okay? The reason why, as a general principle, it's actually the ideal way to play is not to go for kills unnecessarily, to force them essentially, is because the game actually naturally provides you with the money that you get from kills by farm. You're allowed to shoot these little computer-controlled things. Objectives. Yeah, so you can shoot these little computer-controlled things that the enemy can't even hit. Remember, Rito, you removed that. And you can get 15 of those, and that's a kill. But you know what? It's possible to get 15 if... And remember, here's the caveat I'll add. If you're going to do this approach, you probably should be the superior player, and you should be very good at farming. You need to have those two factors there. This is one of the reasons, and one day I'll go into this, as to why I've always had a lot of respect for the game of Froggen, okay? It's not that Froggen refuses to make plays and refuses to have kills, etc. It's that unless a kill presents itself, where that's actually now the better risk reward, like, okay, I've got a high chance of getting this kill, and then I'll get it from that, he'd rather get the same gold without having a chance of dying from killing little computer-controlled millions, and be ahead of you without... And what happens is you'll get to the end of the laning phase and you'll think to yourself, well, he didn't kill me, the score's still 0-0, like that, it's fine. No, he'll be up by 30 CS. That's 2 kills. Now, he didn't put any map pressure on, that's true. You can add, that's an added benefit of being aggressive. You can force reaction, you can have map pressure, you can make people rotate, but he's up 2 kills essentially on you in terms of gold. Yet, it was very low risk, like, in terms of the reward. Very low risk. Essentially, Froggen is the really boring, like, stock market guy who's just watching the trends, and he's just investing carefully. He's fiscally responsible. That's who Froggen is. Whereas most players, who are very skilled players, let's say they have stock market knowledge, they want to be out there making power moves and making this crazy move here, and I've heard like insider knowledge, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. What do you think of this as a general point, Monty? How much of that is bronze level analysis there?
No, I think that that's true, but it even goes further than that as well, because let's say you decide to go to a lane and dive a turret. Well, if they have adequate wards, especially in the side lanes, well, maybe they're gone. Like you spend a lot of time sending 4 people up there, and they retreat to tier 2 because they have adequate vision control, and you get absolutely nothing from that situation. Or maybe you dive them, okay, you get 1 kill, maybe 2, but is the wave preferable? Can you even take the tower after that before the enemy team responds? And in the meantime, they're busy chipping towers in 2 of your lanes, or taking a dragon across the map, or anything like that. And you have to remember too that it's not only that you get the global gold, like you're saying, that there is a more safe way to get the resources that you need. It's that you get map control, and you get to increase your territory on the map and force more reactive play out of your opponents by them having less control over the minion waves, generally speaking, and less of an ability to push forward, as well as less safety. They may have to push forward or just straight up lose CS at that point to the minion wave if they can't safely push up, forces you to buy more wards, and it just changes the entire tempo of the game. So, in my opinion, sure, it can work, but it's just not the ideal way to play.
What do you think, Papa?
I think to one of Monty's early points, one thing you can say about especially pre-2015 Chinese League of Legends is there wasn't enough wards, let's be real. Like, warding was always at a premium, defensive warding specifically outside of OMG with their aggressive wards at the time. But I kind of the way I felt like Chinese teams approached the game then is that, for example, once they started to cotton on to this like rotation-heavy dive style, they would have people there and they'd leave their AD carry bot to farm, for example. They get him a 30, 40 CS advantage, and you might think, okay, the most impressive, the late game carry is getting farm. He's got the farm early, but again, if you lose the map control, like Monty says, that 30, 40 CS lead is evaporated late in the game. You put Sun on a wave clear champion, he'll catch up in no time. And if there's nowhere safe to farm, the early farm you picked up safely means nothing when you have no turrets, and literally OMG is contesting for like your wraiths, right, or your wolves. Like, you can't get access to any neutrals. Only the minions they're crashing onto your inhibitor turret. You've already lost the game at that point. So they were just the first to like really value map pressure. They were an all map, like that's a full court press. I don't even know if that's the correct, but that's like kind of what it felt.
They're sort of reminiscent of modern SK in that way too.
Sure.
Monty, I have a question then. If you're gonna rotate to a lane and dive a tower, etc., or you're gonna create a mid-game team fight, then if you're gonna do that fundamentally sound manner, then you're gonna like push up your waves or have a slow push going. And the idea is you're gonna add in a second factor. Like, if the fight, you don't have to win the fight necessarily, you can then have them forced to either give up a tower or take damage, or they have to take the fight, right? So there's even a fundamentally sound way to do it. Did OMG of 2013 actually did they understand this concept? Was that part of the approach?
No.
Is there a reason why it just wasn't understood in the game at the time?
They didn't have good wave manipulation, that's it. They were just like all-inning everybody's junk all day.
That's an interesting way to phrase it. So when you're on these Riot broadcasts, Monty, you have this $1,000 vocabulary, you're just throwing words out there. Now, on my show, you come on and you're using words like all-inning people's junk all day.
Well,
okay, I see.
I have to bring myself down to your level when I'm here. So otherwise, it would create too much of a discrepancy. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's why I brought Papa in here, because then shit rolls downhill, Monty. I have to someone I can condescend to. So, Papa, from watching LPL, what did you think of the? I mean, really, what did you think of the wave manipulation question here? Was it even a factor back then? Because we're saying World Elite was very good at it, but why is OMG not adding that into their arsenal?
They definitely didn't put it together in the level they might have. Like, at that point, wave manipulation was understood. There were the articles around it. It was a thing that was going to be slightly more common in other scenes. But I mean, OMG, they definitely didn't focus on it. Like, you wouldn't say they had excellent wave manipulation and they were excellent at skirmishing and taking turrets and diving turrets. They didn't put both factors together, and it's much later that those things have happened. Just like the defensive warding, right? Like, warding was already at a much higher level in OGN at the time, but the defensive warding didn't exist. So that's why, these gank squads worked, is that China wasn't good at putting all their like bits of their elements of the game together to make like high level strategy. So
let me put this in a historical context here. So let's imagine like China is like the pre-Mongol invasion, refined society, very advanced. We have World Elite here.
Everyone understands. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, we have World Elite here. Who there's a sense of innovation and refinement within China, and yet maybe they're a little soft. And so when the full aggression Mongols like sweep in from the north, that's just kind of it. Maybe the Mongols aren't as culturally refined, but they are just brutally aggressive, and they just relentlessly push forward.
They come on horseback. They just kill everyone.
They come on
They're savage.
No walls can stop them because Hecarim's going right over the top, and Graves is shooting his ultimate over any piece of terrain. Yeah, pretty much. So there's my analogy.
Plus, what usually makes battle work okay, Monty, is there's supposed to be etiquette to war. Like in war, we kind of agree that we're going to meet. You know, the way war used to work in the West is we used to agree to meet on a field with our two armies, and it would be like a football game. We'd start the fight, and after the fight,
stands in formations. And
after the fight, we all agree that whoever won the fight, they won. Okay, nobody then goes off like who's ever surviving into the other person's village and just kills everyone. But the idea was the Mongols just came in and torched your whole village, just killed everyone, slaughtered everyone mercilessly. That's like the style here. You don't just wait, see if a fight develops. Like, is this a favorable fight? You just go in anyway. You force the fight to work. Okay, we forced the analogy, Monty. If anything, I should have changed the name of this show to Forcing the Analogy, but I didn't think of it at the time. I wasn't so introspective, you know. I hadn't had to examine the core biases that I hold, as I have done through this therapy session that I call Summoning Insight. So on this topic, then, I've got another question for you, Papa. One of the things I always found incredible about OMG was that initially when I was getting into League of Legends and starting to watch, like I was a big fan of Wei Zhao, watching him, like how incredible he was, I thought naively to myself, well, since he's the star player of the region, he's the star player of the best team, and the whole best team's based around him, and then I'm looking at the rest of the region, and all the other good teams have the good AD carries. You have Kid is over on Invictus Gaming, obviously later on Name is coming around in 2013. Then I look at the team that overtakes World Elite, and I'm like, where is the star AD carry? Like this guy San is like, he's a decent player. He's a team focused AD carry, which I now understand more about that style of play, because anyone who's watched the play of Sneaky in latter days, etc., you understand that this sort of player can exist. But how did a team that didn't have a star AD carry in a region with star AD carries overcome the team that had the best AD carry? Is there what went on down there, do you think?
I mean, San is a role player, like you say. He's a team player. He doesn't command a lot of farm. And the games were ending so much earlier. This was before tower reinforcements. Like, it was much easier to take turrets at the time. Like
the bad old days.
The bad old days. And I remember Monty's reaction to the turret reinforcements. He wasn't a big fan of those. But like the turrets went down faster. Games were ending. Like OMG games were ending early. And San, he would play the Graves. Like the Graves is like kind of his trademark champion. So when we finally saw him back in that OMG versus EDG game, I was so happy to see the Graves, because again, you could go Bloodthirst to Last Whisper. You didn't need to go for like the attack damage modifiers like attack speed or crit. You could just focus on burst.
Now, listen, as a follower of Genji, I'll tell you right now, you do need to go for that attack speed crit. Like that's all the game's about. What do you do? Don't you guys even know how this game is played? Kids, buy that Zephyr early and often. It'll save your life. You can kite. You can get away from them. Get tenacity. That's what you need. You need tenacity in your life. Okay, anyway, Papa, keep going.
Those were to be honest, like, even at the time, like the AD carry rankings that they would come out, again, you'd have Name at the top, because he was seen as the most mechanical player, ahead of Wei Zhao even at the time. Like, San would be like 5th on this list. And he just didn't need to be, because other teams, they'd focus on the AD carry, that maybe they'd have the AD carry farming while they tried 4 men to try and stop the 5-men dives. Their AD carry would get some items, but the game would end at 28 minutes. It didn't matter that San didn't have a full build. He had a gold efficient build, and he didn't command the resources or the peel that the other top AD carries did. So on the small amount of income, they're really strong solo lanes. Like Gogoing and Cool consistently been right up there in terms of solo laners. And their solo laners would carry, and San would be at the back. He wouldn't die. He wouldn't do as much damage as the other AD carries, but that's not what OMG needed. And the argument is, it might not be what OMG even need today.
And also, we can talk about OMG a little bit later with the Uzi and how they're doing the season, which is certainly not the same like blockbuster level trade that it could have been. Obviously, there were questions about who was going to get that farm from day one, but it still could have worked out differently. In any case, it's also, I think, pretty important to mention that there hadn't really been a 1-2 solo lane carry punch in China and before OMG existed. We're not talking about Messiah and Xiao Mei carrying the team when we talk about World Elite, right?
His cannon was pretty good, Monty. Top Xiao Mei cannon.
Xiao Mei had a game. I think it might have been the game against CLGEU where he was on Rengar and he had like a godlike game. He had one game.
Okay,
Monty. He had one game.
Broken as fuck old lane Rengar. Yeah, okay. Get out, you two. That's okay. Like, don't come in here and tell me that Olm was a great Zac player. Like,
I'll never hear that said. Shut your goddamn filthy mouth right now. Anyway.
hey, Thorin. Olm was busy solo killing Flame and that final.
Yeah, but you know what, Monty? Same argument with Faker and Pawn. The reason how you know someone's the greatest is if your whole claim to fame is once killing them as a solo kill, you're probably pretty fucking good. Like, if we want to talk about Reggie being solo killed, the list's too long, mate. We'll never get through it all just in one tournament. Okay. Anyway, little shot. Notice the way I deflected all that into Reggie, but now you understand the way my feelings work. Okay. So anyway, on this point of San, what do you think of San overall, Monty? We can talk historically now because you've seen him in multiple World Championships now. I mean, I realise as a fan of KT Arrows and KT Bullets, you're used to a team being able to be very successful without an elite level AD carry.
That's true. Mostly KT Bullets, but Score was the same kind of role-playing AD carry, right? His job was to output as much damage while dying as little as possible, and he did just that on the old KT Bullets. And he didn't aspire to do more than that either. And I think we could talk about Bang in that same capacity on the current iteration.
I know you will.
Of SK Telecom.
I know you will, Monty.
Even though he's starting to not have his eyes on the prize anymore. His play has been a bit questionable as of late.
Okay, Papa, that moment there will be known as the moment that Monty became entirely riots. He just used the phrase "eyes on the prize." Like, he actually just reverted to like caster speak, where you're just hitting cliches. You're saying things that sort of sound familiar, but I don't know what they mean. Like eyes on the prize, step his level up, keep your game on point.
I'm just as
we can talk about SK. We can talk about SKT in a little bit. But
separates a good player of X from a great player of X.
Fair enough. What I mean to say is that he's been flashing forward and trying to be too much of a playmaker as opposed to just playing back.
Are you telling me, Monty, after last week's episode where you explained that Wild Turtle needs to play more like Bang, Bang took it the wrong way round, and he was like, "Hey, this Wild Turtle guy plays like me. Yep. I'm going to play more like Wild Turtle."
That's what we talked about last week on the show. I was like, I said on the show that Bang needed to be more Bang-like. And less Wild Turtle-like.
He needed to have more bang for his buck.
We can talk about TSM because Wild Turtle, I mean, I don't even know. We'll get into it. Wild Turtle's positioning is like losing TSM games, and I don't even know what to say about that. It continues to happen, and it seems like the entire shocking TSM fan base is insanely delusional because it's one of their most...
Now, if there's one thing I won't hear, it's that the TSM fan base is delusional, that they're in denial about the certain players not being very good. They're in denial about the international matchups of certain players. I will not hear any of this said, Monty. I know that actually they're just true believers, and you need to get Jesus in your life, mate. You need to get Reggie in your life. We need to get you convert. Listen, can I talk to you today, Christopher Michaels, about... That's the first time I've actually ever used that name. Can I talk to you about Reginald? Can I interest you to talk about your salvation of your soul? I've got a Letterman jacket right here for you, Monty.
I'm ready
you just
to
put on the Letterman jacket,
to the Church of Vaylife as soon as possible.
Yeah, okay. Papa, you want to ruin your career and wade into this joke fest?
No comment.
Step into the minefield.
No
as
comment. My mind.
So back on the topic of Chinese League of Legends, beyond talking about San, what we have to talk about, and this is one of those things, Papa, where I actually get annoyed, and I've talked to you about this in the past. I get annoyed when people who are experts about League of Legends, who did watch all the games, who were there and saw the strategy, don't actually like put in the effort to do, like, for example, I challenged all these people to make their own top 20 list. I picked out people I thought would be really interesting, they'd have their own perspective, and I thought these people saw more League of Legends than me, who were there for some of it, you know. They know the context maybe even better than me. Why don't they make a top 20 list? It would be ideal. Like, wouldn't you love to see Monty Jat's top 20 all-time player list? And I'm not saying that facetiously. I'd genuinely like to know who would he have at these spots. Where would he rank, for example, someone like Flame, where maybe it's in a region he didn't watch as much. I don't know. I'd love to know this. These are the people who ideally should be doing it more than me. But if no one else does it, fuck it, I'm going to do it, okay? Someone has to do it. So what I get annoyed about is when people who have all this knowledge haven't necessarily like conveyed it much. So one of the aspects is, okay, Papa was there during the OMG era, like I mentioned, and not a lot of people in the West actually know like what was OMG good at. A lot of people don't know how dominant they were for a brief period of time, you know, maybe like 4 or 5 months. Well, part of their dominance that always gets overlooked is that the best player on OMG, in my opinion at the time, wasn't cool. It was this guy LoveLing. And he was this support player who was a fantastic support player. I think LoveLing the support player was better than LoveLing the jungler, which is unfortunately all everyone else knows. Papa, what do you think on that topic?
It's hard because he's a good jungler too, so...
His jungling and his skirmishing, like he's a fantastic skirmish player, whether that's skirmishing on like the support LeBlanc of his later days or just...
I mean,
just
do you not agree with that then?
Was a thing.
You think he's a better jungler than a support player overall?
Yes.
Okay. What did you think of it when he? Because initially their dominance actually came initially while he was the support player, though.
That's correct. He was playing again the pick supports. He was just always a very aggressive support, and then he was aggressive jungler. Like the jungle Yorick again will always typify LoveLing for me because he was against the Lee Sins of the world. Like, that was when Lee Sin was is like most popular. A lot of Lee Sin play, and he realized that if you're jungle Yorick, you walk into the enemy jungle, you put down 3 ghouls, you do 15% bonus damage, take 15% reduced damage, and it's hard to hit skill shots around the ghouls. You can out skirmish a Lee Sin, who was seen as the god tier, dueling jungler. So that was the level he was willing to go, was to jump onto these off meta picks just to be able to out skirmish. Because if he could overpower the enemy jungler, they could rotate, take turrets. It would just make the aggressive wars, the picks, everything happen faster. So he was very astute with his champion pool to just basically, he was all about out skirmishing the enemy junglers.
Yeah, the issue with that is that you actually have to convince the enemy jungler that they want to fight you. If he walks into the jungler and the Lee Sin just walks,
everyone wanted to fight all the time,
and he just walks. Lee Sin's like, nah, I'm just gonna walk on the other side of the jungle now. In the late game, you have a Yorick who just gets kited to death while Lee Sin is insect kicking your carries
who
into the
doesn't have any attack speed items and not really do much.
See, Papa,
okay.
the problem here is this is again where Monte needs to connect to the reality of pro players, okay? Because Monte, he made it sound very easy there. Well, what if the Lee Sin just doesn't fight? You know, what if, guys, we all put down our weapons and now we don't need nuclear armaments anymore? We can just live in peace. Now, here's the problem that Monte doesn't realize. In real life, you know, people will always fight. They will take a chair leg, they'll make that into a weapon, okay? I know that Monte naively thinks the world could work this way. So I'll give you an insight into the sort of where that Monte's mind works connected to the real world. So Monte sat down with this young man on this team he once coached called Doublelift, and he said to him, listen, you know that like if you play against a player like Vasily, if you just don't fight him, you win. And then Doublelift was like, okay, but how does that work though? Because I want to fight him. And he's like, no, that's the thing. If you just don't fight him, you don't play his game. You let him group, you let him do those aggressive moves. You just farm, you play safe, you pick Sivir, you play into the comp. And he was like, are we clear on this? And he was like, okay, Monty-san, I'm clear. And then he went into the game, and what happened? He came into the lane, their eyes connected, the force between them, that magnetic force that dragged them like the moth to the flame, and they had to fight. They were born to fight, Monty. In that moment, they just obeyed their natural instincts as humans, as beings in this world, drawn together. They were two souls, warrior spirits, meant to be joined in glorious union. That's the problem, Monty. Sometimes, ideally, you could live a certain way, but the reality of it's different. So, Chinese junglers were going to fight, right?
They were absolutely going to fight. And, you know, by summer, when the 5-man, like, roams became just 2-3-man skirmishes, again, we were talking about a LoveLing Cool or LoveLing Gogoing, all three of them invading the enemy jungle. And you didn't really have an option not to fight, because if they took the first red buff or the second, they were going to take the rest of them, because they are always about taking out those early turrets early. So, of course, they have the options to invade aggressively and contest buffs. They'd be the first to rotate, because Cool and Gogoing had that same mindset as LoveLing. And yeah, I mean, there is counterplay. Like, obviously, that strategy doesn't necessarily hold as true today, but that was the thing. He was the skirmish god, and he was making sure everyone was coming to fight him in their own jungle.
The reason I brought up the fact that he was a support player, though, Papa, is because when I made the point before, I kind of set it up, well, how could their bot lane have a chance against these godlike bot lanes? Okay, Monty said, well, at the time, there was no great 1-2 punch, okay? So, even if someone wants to tell us, I don't know what kind of naive person would do this, Papa, that FCZF was some amazing support player. In reality, he was a good support player who played with the best AD carry ever. So, yeah, maybe not so much. He wasn't a sick super one. It wasn't Matter and Imp type 1-2 punch, okay? So in the same sense, well, if OMG doesn't have the support, star AD carry, well, at the time at least in China, they had a star support player. And actually, he was an aggressive player. In fact, let me just entirely go the other way. Instead of offending Monty with the Chinese people's opinions, I'm going to offend China Talk now by saying that to me, the San and LoveLing bot lane was like Gorilla and Zephyr. Like, listen, Zephyr's great at sitting on the outside, auto-attacking people who aren't focusing him in any possible sense, while his godlike support player engages, catches people, CCs, does everything essentially, and then has a little fellow on his back who's just firing out little shots, okay? That's how I think of your boy San, and there's the god LoveLing, in whose shadow, in the afterbirth of which this ant can only cower in fear and hope not to be destroyed. Papa, response.
That's the thing. Like, you bring up FCCF. I was actually talking to Pastry Time about him.
I've triggered you, haven't I, Papa?
I try and like conceptualize FCCF as a player, and like he was always good at skill shots. There's a reason why he was always linked to the mid lane, and like his team fighting was good. Just like you could say ClearLove team fighting, but his laning was really passive. Like he wasn't a fantastic laner, and LoveLing was something different. He was a very aggressive support player with an AD carry that kind of knew his limits and played defensively. And it did work it was a different thing. It did work very well for OMG. So I can recognize your point about LoveLin the support. I just was always in awe of his ability to like really take over a map in the jungle role.
What did you think when he was a support, Monty? Do you have any comment on that?
I think that he was one of the most dominant players in China when he was a support, and that it was really his, like, I think I agree with Papa, his skirmishing and his playmaking ability in the mid to late game. And I mean, I don't really know what to think about him as a support versus a jungler right now, because I don't know what his level of support play would be in this current time frame. I imagine it would still be very good, but I also think that even though he may not be as good of a jungler as he was a support, even though I think it's relatively
it's probably a toss-up at this point in time. He's good at both. Probably. He's very good at both, but maybe not a god at either.
Yeah, but I think that the difference between him and other support players in China was less than the difference between him and other junglers in China at the time. So It made more sense for him to be a jungler. And also, that way he could not only affect the mid and late game, but move through the entire period of the game as well and start really trying to get an advantage earlier than he may have otherwise. It gave him more early game impact.
Monty, I've just realized, basically, ClearLove actually agrees with you and me. He was like, you know what, I'm a really good support player, but there's other decent support players. You know, there's people who have skills. There's no one playing that jungle role. That ClearLove guy, man alive, how's he being, this like stolen money, how's he getting away with this? I'll go up there and play that role. Oh, my team's now the best in China. Okay, this worked out for, actually, that chronology was totally off there, but you have to make a joke, you have to crowbar a joke in there sometimes, PapaSmithy.
Yeah, we forget about the fact that Positive Energy actually won that.
Forget about that.
So, jungle.
So anyway, when we talk about that, here's the thing for me, Papa. Here's the anecdote to me that confirmed LoveLing as a god that a lot of people in the West don't know about. If you remember, the only time Westerners have seen LoveLing play support was when at All Stars 2014 he switched back to that role briefly. Okay, Pablo went back to jungle, yes. And he was called Alan at the time. And you remember he was the guy who angrily looked into his monitor and would not shake Faker's hand. I like that in itself. Essentially, he was like he denied the existence of God. He was the Frederick Nietzsche of support players. So I love that in itself, and he's showing poor sportsmanship there. I love that as well. It gets me going.
If he was the Nietzsche, he would be trying to tell us that God was dead, but in fact God was living and
porn is Nietzsche then.
Reigning over him at the time. There you go. Much better.
Porn made God have the grey screen. And Faker was like, "What? Riot, what is happening? My game, client is bugged. I don't understand. My health, where did I go? I can't move." So anyway, going back to the example there, the anecdote that makes me realise what a god Alan LoveLing was that when he played support in that tournament, if you remember, he kept picking Thresh. That was his champion that he was doing all the work on. He was getting all these sick hooks. Now, what naively Western casters thought to themselves, right, well, I know how the script works here. I've seen someone do something twice. That must be his best champion. So they started saying, like, you got to get him off Thresh. Like, Thresh is very dangerous. He's going to do work on it. Now, all the people I knew from Chinese League of Legends at the time were like, what is he doing? He doesn't even play Thresh. Like, they kept telling me this isn't even his style, you know. Actually, he just picked that shit up for that one event and just did it. And if you remember, actually, what people forget about that tournament was when China, if my memory's correct, couldn't, like, because of the patches, they didn't play, like, Morgana or something weird. So actually, they had a deficit at the support position. He kind of, like, overcame by using Thresh. That was, like, his fix-all, and yet he was godlike on it at that tournament. So that's just a little anecdote there to show why I actually think Alan's an awesome player, sport player. If we transition back to him playing jungle now in this aspect, just to touch on that before we leave it, okay? I will always credit him. You know, Monty, within the religion of Thorin, he's got a sainthood. He created this miraculous moment that will go down there. When I think of vivid memories that I've always enjoyed in League of Legends, so obviously top of the list, I won't just say the Blaze games from spring 2013, because most people in the West haven't seen those, so they don't give a fuck. So to give people a reference point people can touch on, obviously one of the games I hold near and dear to my heart is Game 2 of Samsung White against TSM from the round of 8 of this year's Worlds. That will always be a happy time in my life. I can go back there. If I'm ever in a dentist's appointment where he's just drilling me without much anaesthetic, I'll go back to that and I'll be overwhelmed with euphoria, feelings that there's good in the world, that the right things happen to the right people in the world, Monty. Like, the law of attraction exists. That was a wonderful moment in my life. Another wonderful moment in my life was this game in Season 3 Worlds where LoveLing came out on this volley bear pick, and he got mobility boots, and he decided to just go around the map, just seeing, he's just a friendly guy. He was just showing up in people's lanes, bringing them gifts, engaging them in polite conversation. It was a fun time in my life. Papa, do you remember this game from Season 3 Worlds, TSM versus OMG?
I remember this game.
It was a great game, wasn't it?
Pick.
Yeah, it was fun.
That was a ClearLove special too. The Volibear. It was fun, but yeah, I do remember the game. I do have fond memories of it as well.
And that's one of the most brutal jungle games ever.
Yeah. The Volibear can take over games. Like we saw it in the LPL a few times in 2013. Like, if he gets, because he doesn't farm the jungle very well, but if he gets items and is unkillable, like, he does do a lot of damage as well. Like Volibear.
Also, if you can't get enough items to properly kite him, then there's no way to stop him from just running at you.
That was before the Volibear nerfs, I think, which kind of killed him off.
So here's the question, Papa. Here's what's strange. Here's what everyone who's a Westerner is thinking right now, okay? So I get it. You were talking about World Elite and Wei Zhao. I understand. That was like the era 2012 going into 2013. Now they've heard that we're talking about 2013. And on the chronology where we are now, guys, is we're at Worlds. So they're thinking to themselves, something's off here. Like, I don't understand why these guys still haven't mentioned Uzi I, the best Chinese player who was the most dominant in his region, who was winning. Like, why are they mentioning this OMG? I don't care about them. They went out in the quarterfinals. Where is Uzi I? Where is the godlike Uzi I, Papa? We haven't mentioned him yet. Where was he? Season 3, where was he?
So Uzi, Royal Club got it together. Okay, I say Uzi. Sorry, other friends. Sorry,
I'm sorry.
Say Uzi.
Monty, I apologize. I just forgot that Papa's a riot caster there. So much like everyone else in China, he actually was informed that it's actually Uzi. Kobe actually made a speech to the Chinese people, like, listen, guys, I know you don't speak English as your first
Uzi's
language.
Uzi's the name of a gun, and he's a ranged carrier. It makes so much sense.
Yeah, you know that's a weapon, by the way, that's used at short range. It's a semi-automatic machine gun that you have to get in close to because it doesn't have good accuracy.
Is it a sword? It's still a gun. It's still a range.
Well, I wasn't suggesting his name was Saber or Rapier, if that's what you're asking.
Those are both good names, though.
Yeah. Well, the problem with saying Rapier is that in this world, people would say that was like, oh, you're saying rape? So that's the sort of world we live in now, the kind of political correctness. You can't even compare owners to animals nowadays, man, PapaSmithy. It's fucking, to be honest, it's a disgusting world.
Uzi comes from, I remember I was casting Uzi, before any of this discussion happened. We didn't have any inside information on what, I think we were saying FZF instead of FCZF, so, okay. I'm just using what I've been saying since 2012.
So what was he actually like as a player in that year then? Because obviously he had the breakout tournament at Worlds, but was he actually a notable talent to you in LPL?
He was a notable talent. Royal got it all together very late. They got it all together towards the second half of summer when they were playing Twitch Annie mid. This is, of course, Uzi and Tabe was still together back then. And their strategy was the lane swap middle. And that was, again, before the toughness changes. So they would always lane swap middle. Uzi was always a great laner in a 2v1 situation. He's even good in a 1v1 situation. He's very good at balancing out harass and taking turrets. And they just had a really good strategy around Twitch Annie middle. Their jungler Lucky would play Shyvana and Invade, and they would just have the Annie and Shyvana roam into the enemy jungle. Shyvana doing incredible damage, no CC, and Annie from the mid, which no one was playing, providing the CC. So Uzi was still a notable talent. He's always been really streaky in China. He'll have his good games. His teams will be on point. They would do this Twitch Annie. And he was on Twitch, and Twitch was kind of unexplored at the time, was really, really strong. And he would look great there. And it's Caitlyn also, his Caitlyn, they would play Caitlyn and have much the same flavor as well. But the reason why Uzi gets overplayed obviously is that, when the most people watch him, when when he's looking for a clutch performance, he's a fantastic player. But over long seasons, like over this 44-game season we're having this year, but all those LAN tournaments, he doesn't show up consistently enough, like especially in domestic play.
Monty, you know how confused EU LCS pros are right now. Like, Froggen's watching this episode and he's like, he misspoke there. Like, what does he mean? The support and jungle and AD carry were in the mid lane. That's where the best player from the team goes and plays 1v1. Like, do these Chinese people not even know how the game works? What do you mean? He meant to say top there. They lane swapped the mid of the AD carry to top lane. The best player is in the mid lane. Get off the stage. I'm the lead actor here. I'm Hamlet. What are you doing here on this? Anyway, jokes aside, shout outs to Froggen there, because you need to turn your shit around. So there's a little joke to lift your spirits there. Now, please win LCS. So back to the topic, Papa. If you're talking about Uzi, people think if you say that Uzi isn't the player he was at Worlds for his whole career, you're kind of like hating on him. You must just dislike him, whatever the phrasing is in that sense. How would you describe Uzi domestically on any era of time? Like, what is he? How would you contrast him to the guy at Worlds? Because just to give you an anecdote here, here's a funny anecdote for everyone. I'll give you a little sugar to make the medicine that Papa will now deliver go down okay. So one of the things I love is I complain about it, I make fun of it, but I actually love double lift analysis. I fucking love it because it's like getting like news. Say I had a portal that I could open to a parallel universe and news would come through there like, and the Soviets win World War II and they've allied with the Japanese, the Soviets have taken over America, and now it's like wow, that's cool. Imagine if that had happened in our world. That's like what double lift analysis desk information is like to me. Okay, so after Worlds I had the good fortune to do an interview with double lift, some of which people got to see. And in this interview, shots fired, in this interview, I asked Doublelift about Uzi, because Uzi just had the breakout tournament, and I know, thinking of Doublelift's sort of what he likes in an AD carry, he's going to love Uzi. So this will just show you, Monty, the way Doublelift sees the world. Because Doublelift looked at Uzi, and he thought to himself, this is someone who has perfected the way AD carry should be played. He never makes a mistake. He never mispositions. He plays the perfect game without mistakes. He never chooses the wrong engagement. He always has the right matchup that's going to work for him. To Doublelift, Uzi was everything that everyone had told Doublelift couldn't work in AD carry. He'd made it work. He was like Faker, you know. Whereas I actually get the sense, some people have watched him domestically, he's maybe not quite that player. So what do you think, Papa? What's your perception of Uzi as the AD carry? Is he like the flawless guy who just never makes these mistakes?
No, he always plays really aggressively. Like, the reason why it worked in swapping mid is that he could play no escape champions, and it's such a short lane that you don't always need flash if you're overextending and hitting under turret to get away. Like, he could sometimes ambush away, and the flash obviously when needed. But he always, like, Uzi is playing at his best when he's playing Caitlyn or Twitch. And specifically the Caitlyn, I think the Caitlyn is his best champion. He never plays it for whatever reason. And you watch, like, he played one Caitlyn game this season and like was 40 CS up on his opponent in a 2v2, just autoing, you know, always able to auto. He can push the lane, so he can either auto a creep, the turret, or the champion, as if it's like a spell on cooldown. And every time it comes off cooldown, he's autoing. So he's always freely autoing, always pushing the wave, balancing harass and turret damage. He looks fantastic. But, you know, when eventually the 2v1 mid didn't work, or when metas change, like, he's a streaky player. Like, if he's forced to play a 2v2 in the bottom lane, he can be caught out during laning phase. He can, but he always has the aggressive mindset, so he pushes it hard without necessarily the items of the situation. And look, at Worlds especially, it's looked really strong, but it is found out in China, like, quite regularly.
What do you think of Uzi, Monty?
I mean, it's found out in Worlds too. His aggressive playstyle hasn't been able to save him against Korean teams. And it's important to note too that Uzi hasn't ever played Korean teams at Worlds outside of the grand finals in both occasions on Season 3 and Season 4. So whether or not it would be exposed against other Korean teams, we don't really know. I personally suspect that it would be. And it would be dominated pretty hard, but we just haven't seen that opportunity. And in fact, you know, he just hasn't had any opportunities to play. He plays like against one Korean team in a best of 5 every year. Didn't even have a Korean team. He got into the group without Korean teams this year at Worlds. So I guess I'm not as sold on him. I do think that he's very good and can style on people with his aggressive tendencies, but against a more cerebral team, he may be punished harder. And I think that's what we've seen to a certain degree previously. I also think that at Worlds he plays exceptionally well, and he ups his average level goes up several steps when he gets to Worlds.
He's a clutch player, right? He's a big game player is how I'd look at it.
Yep.
But it's also no coincidence that he won 0 games against Piglet and SK Telecom, and he won 1 game against Samsung White and Imp.
Yeah, exactly.
And he lost a game to Wild Turtle.
Yes.
Just saying. Just saying. Oh, he also lost a game to Pushu. Just saying, folks. Just saying. Yeah, facts. They're tricky, aren't they? They get in there where you want things to be differently, but facts get in there. They're little blighters. Little termites that eat away at the foundation.
He just never had that domestic success. So I think that Uzi shows he's a clutch player at Worlds, but other than that, he doesn't amaze me. And that even goes to what we've seen so far this season. I think that in the big match against EDG, obviously like this much hyped match that happened this past week. What happened? What happened, Papa? Why don't you give us a little overview for the people who may not know what happened in that match?
So the first game they played, so we got the late mail in beforehand that they probably weren't going to play Uzi for the match. And in the first game, at least, they played San Jiang, which was really interesting because we thought it was going to be San Cloud. That was basically going to be their Worlds lineup, which obviously they have some previous synergy with, but they played San Jiang.
Syndra support, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, remind me, did OMG win that game?
They did.
And what happened in game 2?
They brought out Uzi and it didn't go so well. Now, I mean, Uzi on OMG has been really fascinating. It's like you almost want to sit there and eat popcorn watching him fit into that team because, again, everyone knows the argument, right?
Pick Vayne for no reason.
Yeah, well, I say it during the commentary, but something had to give. And when he plays Sivir, ironically, the team looks really good. Like, there's so many situations where they'll pick a Sivir comp, and then I'm like, all right, he's going to lock in the Sivir. He locks in the Vayne for some reason. And the team's not playing around him. Like, it's definitely not protect the puppy. It's definitely like he might get his support kind of paying a little bit of attention for disengage, but not really. And he just dies randomly. Like, he dies randomly on Vayne a lot. I think Vayne doesn't have a good win rate for him in general, but he dies a lot, and the team looks unbalanced with him. It's an issue.
Let's talk about that then, because that's the thing. When I described their kind of double lift looking to Uzi and thinking, yes, finally he's shown that everything I've secretly believed and explicitly and overtly believed can be done. It can work. I have to kind of say, like, I'm sorry to destroy your illusions, double lift, but actually even Uzi can't make it work that often. Like, you know what? You know those games, double lift, where things are going great, the laning phase is going great, a fight starts, and you tumble to get that condemn onto someone, but you tumble into those CC that lands on you, and then everyone locks you up, and you know everyone sort of just turns on you, and like just kills you instantly, and then the game's over, and you think, fuck, if I'd have just tumbled differently, like, I could have done it differently. That Uzi does that as well, mate. He also does that. Like, that also happens to him.
Now, hilariously, he actually is 4-1 on Vayne this season, but that statistic does not show the actual quality of the Vayne play, nor the lack of comprehensive strategy that OMG displays in those games. Just because OMG is able to style on fools by like brute forcing them doesn't mean that that's going to be viable at a truly competitive level.
I want to actually contrast, though, double lift and Uzi, because I think they're the two best examples to use, okay? Because the problem is you can't, unfortunately, use the example of Imp, who's stylistically similar to Uzi, because Imp had an awesome team around him, and he had Matters, so that kind of negates a lot of the problems that you would otherwise probably have seen from Imp's game. But double lift and Uzi have contrasting aspects in the fact that at times they haven't always had the strongest teammates, and at times they haven't even sometimes had the right team set up for them. But I think that's one of the key differences. First of all, I will say Uzi does get caught less in team fights. His team fight positioning is very good once he gets to the team fight. But listen, both very strong laners, both can dominate on the hyper carries. But the difference is, Uzi literally did get the protect the double lift for his whole career almost. As in, not only would he have all the people in the team aiming to peel for him, which double lift didn't always have, but he also would even, if you think of the last Worlds, he would have entire comps 100% based around him. They would force the mid laner to 100% pick Orianna if it was available.
Not only that, but my favorite part of watching Uzi and some of these old teams is like literally one of his solo laners will be farming a lane, and then he will walk into that lane and they will recall and give him all the farm. It's hilarious. The concentration of farm onto one champion, like there's no other player who gets that kind of treatment.
Like I've always said, here's a funny thing. When I did my video about Doublelift's career, which is on my YouTube channel, like assessing Doublelift's career, I actually made the point that in a weird way, this will sound weird, in a weird way, I didn't actually respect the fact that Doublelift wasn't selfish enough. Like to me, bearing in mind his style of play doesn't work if he tries to only play a team-orientated style. Maybe it could if he had the right teammates. On his teams where he was the only true carry, you don't want to, essentially, to give you a basketball analogy, if you're the only star player who can make the shot under pressure, you don't, in the last shot that needs to win the game, pass the ball to the guy who's a good player, but he crumbles under pressure. That's what Doublelift essentially did. He was asking Link to carry him to LCS titles if he doesn't play the selfish style. Now, if you accept that Link isn't going to do it, you have to say, right, listen, I know our team isn't good now, but we have one player who can do it. So I want everything based around me. And you know what? If we then fail, it's all on me. Like, it was my fault. That's fair enough. But you don't then allow someone else to decide your fate and then complain after the fact. It's one way or the other. You either have to be unselfish and say, yeah, we lose as a team, or you have to be like, listen, it has to all be on me, but I'll carry us there, So at least Uzi, I'll give him credit. He was selfish enough to demand things went his way, And sometimes it worked.
But look at that point now. Like he is not in that situation now. Gogoing and Cool are still very strong players. Like you have to remember, Cool in 2014 during EDG's rise was first not in the team for the first half of the year, and coming on a severe injury and not quite recreating his performance level of 2013. Cool of 2015 has very much been Cool back at his best in their wins, especially as Monty mentioned, they are winning these Vayne games, but literally Cool's going like 17-2, 11-2, like LeBlanc, Ari, Assassin games, and getting his team over the line. And Gogoing's, Gogoing. So the fact that he's still, they play these Sivir comps. Like they played, for example, like Sivir, Lulu, Maokai comps, like very low damage comps, like 1.5 damage threat comps, and do very well on it. Like the team does flow together well. They balance the farm correctly. It's Sivir, so he's not necessarily demanding all the empty lane farm, and OMG look really good, but he'll just they'll pick the Vayne as if like he feels like he needs the hard carry. I don't know who's picking the champions for that team in situations where it's just not necessary. And look, they still get over the line, but like it's no coincidence the team looked the most on point the moment that San came into the lineup.
Monty, I ask this of the coach who did put Doublelift on Sivir. Isn't it a waste of Uzi's talents to put him onto Sivir?
No, actually, Sivir is a very high damage late game carry that requires good positioning to maximize her damage because she has a relatively low range. So if you are good at positioning and you can get a lot of ricochets in because she's pretty much the only AD carry with an auto reset, you can actually do an insane amount of damage on Sivir. So no, I don't think it is a waste. Actually.
See, that sounded almost like a pre-planned marketing speech that he'd given before. Like he hit all the points there, and at the end I was sort of thinking, yeah, maybe I should play that. You're right. I'll try it, Monty, and I'll be sure to do it in the playoffs as well.
But see, Sivir, you need to rely on your teammates to some degree, right? You do need a front line.
That was the mistake. Yeah, that's when Doublelift realised that. That's when he was like, "What the fuck was that Monty guy talking? Get him out of here! Get him out of here!" Zuna, you know what I'm all about, boy. Like, get me on that Vayne. I'll carry. Like,
yeah, if you're 500 range and you've got Gogoing, Core, and LoveLing in front of you, then sure, like, absolutely, Sivir's fine. And that's why. I mean, they look so good with it. I don't know why they don't. They just keep going back to Vayne. And it's just a real head scratch. And they even the strangest thing about OMG strategy this season, they did a lot of blue side lane swapping and putting Uzi 1v0. He's excellent at 1v0 in terms of building up a CS advantage. Even on Sivir, he'd go in a 1v0. So maybe they diagnosed that Sivir's laning phase wasn't kind of the all beating thing we all thought it was in week one.
Right, please just clarify for people in the West what he's good at 1v0 means.
So what it means is, obviously it's the whole freezing the wave without your support. Your support's roaming. You freeze the wave close to your turret. He's excellent at denying even experience from the enemy. Like once the jungle follow happens and your Maokai or whatever, and you want to poke in and get as much experience as possible, when he's allowed to play faux aggressive, like he's not under the turret hitting the AD carry or the turret or the minions. He's just controlling the wave. He was excellent at that. Even on Sivir, like it'd be an advantageous lane matchup for the Sivir comp, and they'd still put him up the top lane in a 1v1 or a 1v0. He'd build up a big CS advantage, and then they just rotate him around Dragon Time. He'd be over leveled, so of course he'd have on the hunt early and have a BF sword item of some description, and that strategy worked really well. So they're good with Sivir. They're good with the freezing strategies, but there is counterplay to freezing. So they've tried the Vayne freezing as well, which does work. There was a game where he started, he went top lane against, one of the tanky champions, probably a Maokai. and farmed literally a Blade the Ruin King before he backed for the first time, and then showed up fights and did well. Like that was a strategy that worked, but it's exploitable, and it's not like it's so Uzi centric. They have to do that, and that's why when you have San and you can just build standard and you can rely on Gogoing and Cool to be the carries and San to do the damage in the back line, that the team looks balanced.
Do you have a comment on that, Monty?
I agree. I think that they did look more on point with San. I think that San knows his role on the team, and I think that definitely OMG has a higher possible ceiling with Uzi, but it's going to take a lot more work to develop that synergy and to figure out exactly what the roles on that team are. And fortunately for them, they've got a lot of time, so they got nothing but
a lot of matches, a lot of time, absolutely.
To keep the historical theme going, I have another area, Papa, where it's going to be about like historical context and how do you frame this. Because remember, one of the points I brought up on the World Elite section was if you're going to say that ClearLove's an all-time great player, like whatever, top 20, whatever, whoever's listed would be okay. To put him on their top 20, if they're also going to have Messiah and Wei Zhao was a given, now they've got 3 players out of 1 lineups in their top 20. Now, speaking of another team that has 3 players that people think of as great Chinese players, and it makes it hard to rank them, is OMG. Because you've got Gogoing, the top laner, LoveLing, the jungler, and Cool, the mid laner. Now, could you even give us an order of importance, or which ones are the stars to you out of these 3?
It's very difficult because, look, I'd love to say it was Cool first, just because, and ignore 2014, but it's probably not fair. Like, I guess it's like Cool had a really poor 2014, both from his health standpoint and just, slowly warming up, coming back into competitive. So
he only really shone on his signature champion, Yasuo.
Yeah, his signature champion, the one-off pick that he actually did really well on. Yeah. So I mean, like, are we talking about in terms of all-time greatness?
Yeah. Where do you see them?
I guess I'd have to at this point say Gogoing, LoveLing, Cool, which seems harsh, but I'm one person who does really rate Gogoing. Like, some of that's taking into account like his role on the team, but I think he, through different metas, has been immovable, like, and like really consistent on like mage champions, tank champions. Like, I think he's a very flexible player and he's very reliable, apart from some poor performances this season. So I probably rate him highest. I think LoveLing, now that you frame the support stuff, like, I hadn't really even thought much about that time, but of course he was doing something different from support, and even when he came back on support, he was still strong. And I really do rate his jungling. I'd have him second, and Cool, because of the 2014 asterisk, in third, though I think Cool is their most important player right now.
Is Gogoing the best top laner of all time?
Probably not. I think he'd be top 3.
Who would you top 3 be?
I don't like being drawn on all these things, but I know how much you love your lists. Top laners. Top laners of all time.
I mean, we've got Rain Man, Voyboy.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We're really throwing the big names.
Long Panda.
Wicked, Darien. Someday.
I think Flame will be in the
ODN
top
champion
3.
Someday.
Flame will be in the top 3. I don't know if he'd be number 1 for me, at least.
Who else?
Top line.
I mean, you're already in a difficult situation because you can now only pick one out of Reapered, Shy, names like Magnum. You can only pick one of those at this point.
I guess.
Follow your heart, Papa. Don't give in to public pressure. I know you're in Riot now,
I guess when I look at times,
I'm
not a big. Like, I wouldn't fight for Reapered. Like, I recognize what he did.
Of all the statements said on this goddamn show right now, Monty, I'm not going to stand for I wouldn't fight for Reapered. I would go into war right now and die for Reapered.
I will be Reapered's champion. You know how much I
see.
Like
him. Just as I was really like paying close attention to the scene, Reapered was like in spectacular decline. Like, maybe that undervalues how important he was, for the first couple of OGN seasons. And
Monty,
and also the fact that he managed to take an international tournament where his entire team.
We're going to talk about that
garbage
SKT tournament. Was he EDG or SKT at the time?
It was SKT.
ESG.
ESG. No, they had immediately been signed to SK Telecom. That was actually SK Telecom's first team in League of Legends.
Yes, I remember.
And who were his teammates? Horo,
Don't forget
Mightily, Raven, and Starless. Okay, I'm not even sure. Reaper's performance at that IEM in Cologne was one of the greatest hard carries of all time in the history of the game.
Mightily was
show me a
competitive mid laner of all time.
Well, we have
to win a big tournament, a big international tournament. Definitely,
to win an international tournament. Come on, we have a lot of choices about the worst mid laner of all time. That is definitely not true.
In terms of winning a competitive tournament, we'll couch that. But he was not good.
Awful.
He was really bad.
Okay, and Reaper had to get like double-digit kills every game to pull the wins out of his ass in order to win that tournament. And he beat Fnatic and a bunch of other good teams there too.
I guess I probably just rate history of accomplishments over short-term accomplishments, especially in the more kind of formative years of League of Legends. Like obviously that tournament was like his last hurrah.
Here's my secret, Papa. One of my strengths is I'm like the opposite of like a Gandhi and Martin Luther King. I can actually find immediately where we all disagree and we're all very much different and we should never say that we're all one. I can find the points of disagreement. So I like to just point out that I've successfully created a show where I had a guy come on, tell Monte Cristo that ClearLove's an all-time great player, really great player, and then go on to explain why Reaper actually is not particularly that significant to him. He doesn't really see the relevance. And why you bring up that IEM clone. Now about Enter the Dragon, what I was about to say was, the context is a beautiful thing, Papa, isn't it?
Look, my mind is scattershot from casting so many tournaments for so many different people. Like,
so when he says it as though like casting LPL is like he had a heroin addict at one point in time, and he's like, listen, those days are behind me. Like, I'm moving on. Listen, Monty, I'm regularly watching LCK now.
Because I cast all those ESL like qualifiers for IEMs as well. So there was like it was like Asia qualifiers. Sometimes it was separate China, Korea qualifiers. Like there's just so many different games for like different amount of stakes that like I can only really remember trends rather than like specific performances very well.
Okay, so anyway, we were on the topic of Gogoing though. I think that in the case of Gogoing, I've always thought he was a very good player, but I actually feel like he's had a miniature Uzi effect where his Worlds was so good. This one, that I feel like people have boosted him too high now. And you also have to realise that Worlds, we made this point before that show happened, Monty. Before the Worlds happened, we made this case, and we were actually talking about Save at the time, that this should have been the tournament where Save went crazy, because there was no other great top laners to face him. It was just Save. And then Gogoing was like the afterthought, So, it's Gogoing who actually ended up having a great tournament, and obviously he had it against Save as well, so that helps, etc. But have people boosted him a bit too much, Monty? Has one tournament given him tournament now?
I think
too much
he was clutch. I agree, but not I think to the same degree as Uzi. Like Uzi's performance is much more dramatically up and down, whereas I feel that Gogoing is more consistent, definitely in the domestic leagues. He just doesn't have that same carry effect. And just judging from this season of LPL, Cool really is the primary focus of that team. I mean, that guy goes nuts in a lot of games, and he carries a lot more often than Gogoing does at the present time. And we're in a meta right now where you can really carry as a top laner. That's not really in question. There are a lot of these carry champions that are coming back into play. So
his champion pool, though, has kind of been the most impacted by Uzi coming through. Like he has had a few Kassadin games where he's gone off massively. Like he's been pretty good on that champion, but like he's played a lot of Maokai. Like I think he did an interview and said Maokai was his favorite champion. Like so obviously carry potential on that is limited. He finally played his first game on Gnar actually in that win over EDG. And was fantastic.
Yeah, he was great. Well, I mean, we can get into that match a little bit.
Sure.
Part of that was Koro just going brain dead at... I don't even know what he was doing. I was just watching the beginning of that game, and he just gets ganked at 3:30. It's like he knew that there was a possibility. He's pushing forward, and he's going up against Rek'Sai Gnar as Rumble with all of that CC. Meanwhile, what's going on in that top lane? It's 3 minutes 30. He's pushing forward with no wards, and LoveLing just comes up right after his, at the typical time you would gank. What else is happening? Oh, right. Gogoing's in Mega Gnar form, and Koro's still pushing up. I just face palmed so hard when he died right there because it was such a risky maneuver to be doing at that given time. So I feel like he was helped out quite a bit by Koro playing really badly in that first game.
I think that's fair. And like, look, he obviously played really well. I think it was 21 out of 22 kill participation or something. Like, he hadn't shown the whole season so far. It had been a lot of the Maokai. I just think he's always been consistent. Like, he's always been consistent, and not in a ClearLove way, but in like playing the meta. Like, I remember he used to play a lot of Renekton back in season 3, like everyone did, I guess. And he would always be, by far, the most impressive thing I observed about him was that he was the best at not dying in a turret dive. He was so good at juggling aggro and like moving around the turret and just staying alive. He would live in situations like it was almost unkillable under turrets, which at the time was a big thing because everyone was diving turrets.
Lads, you have a player named Flame.
No, he never did anything. That's the thing, Monty. You have to realize the context here. I'm not someone who's like a hater of Gogoing at all. I think the guy's great. I've loved watching him. In fact, it's the other way. I just want to put him in his correct place, okay? Here's the thing. I'm a connoisseur of the top lane carries, PapaSmithy. So I'm not saying even that it's wrong that you like this player, he's very good, but you're sort of like a neophyte into the world of like cultured palate, okay? And you're someone you've started to drink a bit of wine. You're starting to get into your wine, you know. You say, listen, my favourite wine is this lovely Merlot that I've been drinking. And I'm like, oh, that's a good wine. But you know what? If you want to see the best wine that ever was, come down to my cellar. And first of all, that's one of my opening lines anyway of invitation to people, but other things are in my cellar. But I say, come down to my wine cellar, you know. And I show people, and I go, look, we've got the Shy of late 2012 there. Fantastic vintage. Very sharp taste, but it keeps your senses about you. It's very good. We've got this Macnoon on here. It's kind of a bit heady, you know. It's very euphoric. It's very like a kind of a Bacchus feel to it, you know, a Dionysian revel, enjoying in that. You'll find yourself under the turrets on a sidewalk somewhere trying to proxy farm in the early hours of the morning, and then you come over to this one. The pièce de résistance, the Flame early 2013. Now this is a phenomenal wine. Aged very slowly, brought to its perfect peak, and then some disgusting piece of shit watered it down, and they tried to say that wine should be banned, and then they tried to bring in wine coolers as the new wine that everyone's drinking, and frankly, I'm disgusted with the whole thing, so drink your drink and get the fuck out where you Gogoing. So that's kind of what's going on here, okay?
Like, Flame at his peak, inarguable, is the best top laner of all time. It's just when the meta changed, like his efficiency and his ability to do what he did so well, and the freezing especially, like it was amazing at, like, it changed.
And he also didn't have Cool in his mid lane, and he didn't have LoveLing in his jungle. Yeah, it's weird that, isn't it?
I mean, look, that's why...
Weird, you're just not as efficient.
Top 20 lists are like not as subjective, right? Like, obviously I paid more attention to Gogoing. I was casting him. Like, you can call it bias or whatnot, but like, I was more impressed with Gogoing, apart from the peak period where clearly Flame was the superior top
we'll
liner.
always have to just wonder. The biggest question in the history of League of Legends, Monty, will always be, how did Looper go from that incredible efficiency, knowing how to play it, having a wide champion pool, just suddenly he just became average? I don't get it. I'll never understand it. I've tried looking for a sort of pattern there. I can't find one. I think he might just be the best ever. Thoughts on Gogoing into Flame, Monty?
I think Flame is the better player. He's had much more consistency in terms of his ability to carry with not as spectacular teammates, that's for sure, and has had very successful strategies built around his ability to play the game.
So the Gogoing topic there was in that trio of players. You had LoveLing, Cool thing. You actually sounded like you were a bit down on Cool. Like you want to downplay. Okay, the hype around Cool obviously is that he's so explosive. No, I mean Papa here. He was kind of playing it like he doesn't think Cool out of the three. Maybe he's putting Cool as the last.
I only think for historical context, I look at his 2014 and like have to dampen him. But like if we just pretended that didn't exist, absolutely is the most important of the three players. Like on form in 2013 and 2015, Cool is the barometer for OMG's success.
What is it about him as a player then? Because here's one that you'll love as well, China Talk people. Just to give a reference point, the player I think Cool is the most like is actually Bjergsen right now in NA. Because when he has the hard carry game, it will be so spectacular that the person who only looks at the hard carry game will be like, wow, he's the best, like he would beat anyone, you know, he'd one of the best ever. But you have to also look at the games where sometimes he's just off and he just has a middling performance, and sometimes he has a bad performance, just like Bjergsen obviously had against the Unicorns of Love. It's not, you can't do that all the time, and how often do you do that? You know, it's that, there's the considerations we're bringing in here. What's Cool like in this sense? Because obviously he has had, like if you were to put together hard carry games by a mid laner, This guy would have a number of the top 10 performances of all time, some insane ones.
I mean, a team that's built around aggressive play, like aggressive skirmishing. If you play the Aris, though, of course, his most synonymous champion would be the Ari, the pick skirmishing champions. A skirmishing team with a strong pick player in the mid lane, he's gonna get those games where he just snowballs out of control. And you're right, there are games 17 kill, 20 kill.
What was the game this season where he played LeBlanc and had like 24 kills or something fucking insane?
That was
he's had multiple
the game against IG, I think. Was that where it was like the LeBlanc versus Ari matchup? I think.
Yeah, he did like a 1v1 outplay in the bot lane. Could be the one. That
Yeah,
was
they
an
both
amazing
had-
game.
He's had a bunch of double-digit kill games on LeBlanc, though. That's not the only one. It has been his most dangerous champion in 2015.
Yeah. Ari, like, obviously overtuned on 5.2. We're still on 5.2 in LPL, so Ari's still very strong, but LeBlanc has been by far his consistent. He's played it a lot more and taken over every game bar one, I think, on that champion. So pick champions and aggressive rotations, they bring out his strengths, but you know, you have to balance that with 2014 where, look, he didn't play and then he was slow to warm up. And on wave clear champions, when he's on the Lulus of the world, like, he doesn't take over games in the same way. Okay, you can't, like, it's a different thing, but in his element, when it's a pick champion, when it's his team doing well, he is usually the person carrying his team.
So Monty, in 2013, when people would say things like, Cool can stand against Faker, it felt like it irked you a bit in some sense. What do you think about, and I remember when we had Froskurin on this show, good times, when she was kind of building up Cool as this all-time great player, I'm not sure you entirely bought the whole package. What do you think on Cool as a player?
I think he's a great player, but when we talk about Cool versus Faker, the conversation has to go into champion pool, and I don't think that there's a champion. I think Faker is equal, if not better, on all of the champions that Cool is good at. Plus, he has a lot more depth. So that's how you compare Faker against everybody. Is that he is capable of playing a wider variety of picks than pretty much anybody else that has ever played this game in its history. And on his enemies' good picks, he is at least as good, if not better. And there's no question that Faker is the best LeBlanc player of all time.
Agree.
But the boy Bjergsen, he's coming for that title, Monty. So you just hold on to your butts.
Okay.
I actually have become evil at this point on this show. Yes, Papa?
On the Faker point, I completely agree in that Cool is a mage player, like specifically a mage pick player like the LeBlanc Ari. He looks good. He can play assassins, like just as he's shown in the Yasuo games, but it's just not his standard mode of play. He wants to play champions that can 2v2 really well, because that's, again, how LoveLing always played. So it's always the Ari LeBlancs that he looks the strong. And obviously he can clear waves. Obviously he can do other things, but they're not strengths to his bow. Again, it's when assassins are in meta, or when, you know, he can get his pick champions and the comps are built around it, then he's really, really strong. So it is situational versus, as you point out, a player like Faker who can play all the roles, right?
Since I've just remembered it now, before we leave this whole topic of OMG, I just want to throw out there one other caveat when you're talking about Gogoing. Now, think of the other names that we're going to have in the greatest top laners of all time, okay? We're going to have Shy, we're going to have Reaped, we're going to have Flame, we're going to have Macnoon, we're going to have Gogoing. Of all those 5 names, here's a little pattern that you can notice. Only one of those 5 names has a jungler who would even be considered vaguely close to the top 20 players of all time, and that's Gogoing. Macnoon has Watch, the less said about that the better. Flame has Helios, who deservedly plays on fucking Velocity right now. The vitriol there against Helios. Shy had Cloud Templar, good player, but unfortunately the sinking of when their careers came along is kind of like the zenith of Cloud Templar is actually early on in Shy's period, so unfortunately he doesn't have like a great player there. And then who was the one? Reaped? Helios again, admittedly the better Helios, but okay. And then after that, Horo.
And also Daydream for Flame as well.
Meanwhile, Gogoing has LoveLing.
Daydream, out of all those players, Daydream is probably the best jungler.
Papa, you don't agree with that. You do not agree that Daydream is better than LoveLing. Come on.
No. I'm saying amongst the Korean top
okay.
players.
No, that's fine, sure, okay.
Yeah, I guess, you know, a fair point that also extends your conversation is that the talent pool in top lane was a lot stronger.
I mean, I'm sure all those players would love to have like an all-star jungler, you know. That's the dream if you're the top laner.
Sure. I don't disagree. Again, like, I was closest to Gogoing, so I'm naturally gonna have been watching a lot of his play, and like.
Were you mesmerized by his jawline?
Oh yes.
The way he came in there, just like a. This is the thing about all top lane. Let me explain to you, PapaSmithy, what the top lane is about. The top lane is about the homoerotic ideal that all men have. This is why we like a man's man, because he comes in there and he shows off the masculine qualities in a way that is very homoerotic. He comes in there, he provides, he shelters. You can follow him into battle and he'll lead the way. If you're unsure, he'll be the guy who leads the way. He sets the tone. You just have to put your faith in him. He's the fatherly figure, the paternal one who provides in battle. He gives the spoils to you. He gives you your place. He puts you in your place in life when you're not ready to become the actualized man in your own life. He takes care of women, but in a way that's very masculine. He doesn't just bow to their concerns in the same way that someone might to a jungler who said that he wants that, or to the mid laner who's selfish and wants to take it. He says, no, I'm my own man. He stands for that. He's the heroic ideal. He's that Byronic hero that we all wish we could be, PapaSmithy. That is the top laner, my friend.
Okay, I can appreciate that.
So Monty, have you just realised that you're essentially in an unrequited heterosexual love affair with Reapered?
You know what's funny is I get to talk to Reapered all the time because he's doing a broadcast for T-LOL for SK Telecom's LOL app right now at the studio. So I still get to talk to him. It's funny.
Jesus Christ, that's almost like Alex Sitch levels of like where did their career go? He does say he works on an app about League of Legends for OG. Does he do casting? No, just does.
No, he
works on
does
the app.
cast. No, he cast it.
Okay. That's like when Rapid Star became the co-host of that I'm a Carry show or whatever. Like, Jesus Christ.
Interesting opinions. When I asked him about the top 3 top laners, he said that they were Sunday, Trace, and Marin. Didn't even include Duke in there. Not really sure what that was about.
How did Someday get on that list?
I don't know, dude.
How did Someday get into an OGN championship? How did Someday anything? Someday, anything, Someday. I don't understand Someday. He is average. He's the cop of top lane. It's not bad. He's perfectly serviceable. That's the whole thing about Someday. He is serviceable. But you don't put him out. You don't
he's
put
consistent.
Like a fucking Ford Fiat or whatever in place of like a Bugatti.
So I think on the right team he was fine. When he had Kakao and Rookie to shore him up, the problem was he doesn't have that anymore, so he's not looking so great.
So to transition into modern day League of Legends in terms of China, we talked about OMG a bit there, and that on paper this is one of the most exciting roster moves ever seen. The most exciting, actually.
It was definitely the biggest move in the last year.
Put it this way, PapaSmithy. Here's all you need to know. When that move was made, Monty had to actually acknowledge in 2015 that it's even possible that a Chinese team might win the World Championship next. Do you understand the magnitude of that admission?
I was listening to the
They're not even Korean. Do you understand? They're not even Korean. Look at their passports. They're all from China. There's not even a Korean import in there.
I mean, I think everyone involved responded the same way, though, and they couched it with, let's see how it goes, because there was the obvious question about spoiling the broth. Like, there was the obvious question about how they would distribute the gold, and they themselves haven't worked it out. They've actually, they've said publicly that they're going to rotate the roster. Like, they've got about 75 supports on the roster between Cloud, Jiang, Luo. I believe Dada might still be on the roster even. Pomelo is listed as a sub support. He could probably play sub jungler. Sorry, he could probably play support.
What is the ideal? If you had to pick, okay, let's go Clement Chu style. Well, the system that OMG will use to be successful, okay. You can have a triple threat team, but to me, I've made this point before, the point is all 3 can't actually be like the focal point of the whole team and the main threat, okay? They can be a threat. And in some senses, what would make a triple threat team that worked good is the idea that in certain circumstances, you could have another guy who doesn't normally play the main threat, be the main threat for that one game or that one, that would be the luxury you could have. But someone's going to have to give something up in this team. So if it was up to you, which way would you go? Which of the 3 carries would you ease back a bit on to let the others be the star of the show? Which would you pick from what you've seen so far?
Gogoing. I would say he's the one that can. I think that Cool is too good on mage mid lane players to go for something like a Lulu. Like, Lulu's fine, obviously, but if they're going to have to modify the champion pool to support a little bit less gold, lane swaps, etc., I think it has to be going on a champion like Maokai.
Okay. And is that the approach you think that OMG is taking at the moment? Like, have they figured that out?
I mean, the Sivir comps did seem to suggest that, and the Sivir Hecarim I liked quite a lot. I mean, you can argue the Hecarim picks are always a bit interesting in the LPL with the teleport ignite.
Well, yeah, they've been doing that in Korea too.
And obviously Hecarim has carry potential. Like,
yes,
if they wanted to go for that comp, if we had Sivir and say, you know, like not Trinity Force Hecarim, but maybe go for more tank Hecarim and then just go for the pick mid lane, it'll be like fine. But Sivir Maokai Lulu has worked for them.
I feel like if you're not going Trinity Force on Hecarim, though, you might as well just not play Hecarim. That's my feeling about Hecarim, because the entire point is why you pick him is because his damage is so insane in the back line if he can get back there with the T-Force.
It's the burst, right? When you get the Trinity Force proc, the Devastating Charge max second, and the Ignite, you're talking like over 1,000 damage instantly. Like it's silly.
So, but why? The question is, if you're not going to build a Trinity Force, and you're not going to try and carry with Hecarim, why don't you just play Maokai? Which is...
And that's what they do, right? They play a lot of Maokai. So I do agree. It has to probably be Gogoing, just because, again, Cool's so good on the mage champions. And Uzi, at least at the present time, they tried to have Uzi play Corki. He's never been a Corki player ever. And it showed.
So here's the problem. OMG was the marquee names, and this was like, if this can work, they can be the best. But the best team in China at the moment is EDG. What do you think of EDG, Papa?
I think they're very impressive in that. Like I was doing some research on the G Tigers just because, again, like I have limited time, so I don't get to watch as much LCK as I want. I was trying to look at the different comps they were running because, of course, they pioneered the Juggermore that you guys coined that is different, and we've seen teams try and ape that. Like EDG have played with so many different styles of play, like even as simple as like Protect the Deaf to like a lot of initiation required and like solo lane carries, like Koro stepping up, especially in the first few weeks. He's had some carry performances. Like EDG go from... He's
also had some really bad performances like he did against OMG.
Absolutely. That's the thing. Like Koro, like that's the surprising that people like at week 3 were like talking about like he's the big carry top laner in China. Then he was getting solo killed by Kohler in 2 games in a row and like really random stuff happening. So I'm definitely, you know, tempered on Koro as a player, but I'm really impressed with what Pawn has meant to the lineup in terms of the fact that they had a wave clear mid laner, they had a reliable mid laner before, but Pawn, especially in the first weeks when, say, for example, Fizz was viable, he was doing a lot of initiation work for a team that's traditionally had problems with initiation, like relying on ClearLove or maybe the support for initiation, but having a mid laner who can initiate opens up different strategies, and it's not just been late game focused comps, they have been doing the rotating comps, and you got Def, to obviously excellent Corki player, can play the Jinx of the world. So because they will literally like change their style in a series like multiple times during a week. Like they'll play Protect the Deaf, then they'll play, you know, a Fizz comp in the middle, and then they'll try something different and out of the box. And like the fact that they're so hard to research, like they're so hard to predict what their champions they're going to pick, let alone like what style they're going to play. That strategic versatility really does impress me. So I think they're a hard team, and I don't envy any team that has to like research and like prepare for a series against them, because you just don't know what they're going to play. And
also I think what's key about EDG right now is that they can really pick up each other's slack. And when we talk about the OMG EDG game that happened, the series that happened this last week, in a best of 5, I'd bet the farm on EDG after seeing those 2 games, because even when OMG was dominating in game 1, Pawn was fighting back. They were playing well from behind because Pawn was landing the clutch spears and finding those assassinations on Nidalee, and he really kept them in that game for a lot longer than I think they had any right to be. So that was impressive. And then in game 2, EDG just kind of mopped the floor with OMG. So
it was a dismantling. Like the moment that Koro teleported bot and got like a random triple or quadruple, whatever it was.
The Kassadin, yeah. So I think that just from watching those 2 games, I think this is the value of seeing these multiple games played out against teams in a given week, is because after watching that, you could say, okay, well, OMG did win game 1, but EDG fought really hard from behind, whereas when EDG won, it was crushing.
So Papa...
And like...
Yeah, go ahead.
You go ahead, sorry. It's okay.
When people come on this show to represent Chinese League of Legends, they'll go to a certain degree. Like maybe they'll make statements like they think Cool's particularly good here. They'll make statements of like Chinese players being better than Westerners. But once they get close to Monte and his aura comes out, they back away. They're not suddenly as bold as they were before. They're not as confident.
Okay.
They won't
So
ever really.
What gambit are you throwing?
They won't
What do you
ever
want me to
really
say?
champion the Chinese players to the degree they wish they would. And in secret, when they gather huddled in the darkness, whispering to each other their treasonous words. They won't say the things they will there in the light of Monte Cristo. Okay. So what I want to ask you is this: right now we're in a situation where even though this GE Tigers team is dominating Korea, you can look at some of the other teams in that region and see flaws that they have, or where they're rebuilding, or where they're getting new teams.
Sure.
So even though it's dominance, it's not dominance in the same way as when like SK Telecom dominated one of the most competitive eras. It's a bit different. Sure. So now you have this team in China who's doing very well, EDG. How would EDG match up against GE Tigers in your sense? Could they be the best team in the world, EDG?
I think they could be. I think they'd match up pretty well. Like, I'd be really excited to see. It's such a shame that they're not going to IEM with how the format is. But like, I like GE Tigers have done some really innovative things, like the Juggernaut in particular, and really amplifying Prey's strengths as a player. Like, I've seen a lot from the GE Tigers. EDG. They've shown a lot of different things, so I guess in a best of 5 between those teams, I think at minimum it would go 5 games. But whether EDG would win, I guess I haven't seen enough GE Tigers to make a definitive claim on that.
I'd call GE 3-1, but I do think it would be a competitive series. I think there would be close games, but just with GE has shown so many compositions as well. That it's very difficult to be able to lock them down, combined with, I know that LPL is weird because of the number of games, and a lot of the times these teams don't appear to take them very seriously. So I'm waiting to see what playoff EDG without like Vagar mid looks and some of the other weirder junk that they've done that I don't think would be competitive against really top teams. Because I want to see serious EDG. That's the question. That's the confusion a lot of the time that we run into with the LPL, is that there is such a distinction between top and bottom teams, and because of the sheer number of games, they don't have to take every game particularly seriously.
And the big question is though, how good is OMG? Like when we talk about OMG, it's like you never know how they're approaching a 44-game season. It's like when people were talking about, all right, SoundCloud are going to be playing not Uzi, my first thought was like, all right, that's very smart. It's a 44-game season. Why have the Deft versus Uzi bottom lane matchup? Like, why show it? There's no real incentive to. Both these teams realistically are going to make playoffs. Like, I can understand kind of like the strategic machinations of a 44-game season, because it's so different to what we're used to, having such a long season. So it's very difficult and it's very risky right now to pigeonhole teams in either league. Like, but EDG, just the strategic flexibility and the fact that they can do it on multiple comps has been what's impressed with me, and that's why I think they could, like, they're not just like beating the Chinese meta, they're showing different things, they're playing solidly across multiple roles. They should be able to be very ready for international competition.
But the question of communication comes up then, and I just don't think that even with the elite players that EDG has right now, that they are going to be able to communicate against another truly world-class team to the degree necessary in order to win a game, to win a series rather. And also, I see a lot more fundamental mistakes in EDG than I do in GE. Like we were talking about that gank the other day. I don't see Smeb dying like that. That was just, horrible by Koro. So I think that those little disadvantages, those little moments of weakness would be EDG's undoing if they had to face the current GE Tigers roster, who is looking, it's hard for me to even think of what the flaws are.
So you brought
GE
up
right now.
Last week, though, you said one of the reasons people can't beat GE in Korea is that you can't take away their comp poker. You can't do the Juggernaut yourself and make it work. And then also,
that's one of the reasons. But they have some great strategic versatility
let's just stop there. So no one in Korea can do it. Surely if any team could do it, it should be EDG, right? Deft sounds like exactly the player who could pull off that style of combo play.
It's true.
And they have run a very similar comp. A comp that there was I don't have the lineup here, but it was very much a Juggernaut-esque comp, and there's no reason they couldn't do it.
To be fair, with Draven,
yep, which is so different but so similar in different ways. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's so Draven.
So Draven.
All right, so let's transition into talking about IEM Katowice, which is coming up in the next couple weeks, because we just had the group stage released for that, or the teams that are going to be in each group, and then so we have a better picture of how this tournament's going to play out and can make some predictions. So considering we're just talking about China, let's talk about World Elite, because right now I think they're a very interesting team because they have been doing so poorly, but they really did show a lot of life, particularly in the last week of play. So Papa, why don't you tell us your thoughts about World Elite and what their strengths are at the current time and what their trajectory has been over the course of the season, because they've been having a lot of trouble finding an cohesive identity for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with your point. Like, they started off the season and we saw Spirit on Jungle River. Like, we saw them really attempt a really hard carry from the jungle position, and they had a lot of communication issues to begin with, but it was just clear they hadn't really worked out an identity. Spirit, definitely the strongest player objectively on the lineup. STYZ has a lot of hype, and when he was playing on LGD many moons ago, was a hyper carry player from the bottom lane. So it looked like those two would be the kind of forerunners of the team when they were successful, but they started up the season 0-11. Like, they started rooted to the bottom of the table till they finally won a game against Vici. They've gone through different identities. So Spirit's kind of the easiest one to keep track of. Like, he started off with really hard carry, like definitely the jungle Riven multiple times, like twice I believe he played that, but also really went with the more damage Rengar, like tried to carry from the jungle. Didn't work. They went kind of the more Jarvan centric comps, it's more pick comps. Again, it kind of relied too much on Ninja to take advantage of a game, and he's more known for his passive lane, despite the fact hilariously he's like 0-7 on like Jace and Xerath, his previous like pocket picks. So he struggled a lot with the wave clear champions. But this week was the big thing where against Invictus Gaming, like a game you'd have to say they were going to lose 2-0. They won 2-0 the first game with Spirit on Nidalee. Like, Spirit's Nidalee, the amount of pressure he put out, like he was over-leveled, I think, even compared to his own team. He put out a lot of pressure and was very impressive. And Spirit, he's found Nidalee and Rek'Sai this week in terms of like whether it's power farming the jungle and being able to show and lane and do those damage ganks with Nidalee, control Dragon, or Rek'Sai having, of course, the split push abilities with her global. Those are champions that I think are really key to World Elite doing well, because it was a Ezreal mid, Corki jungle Nidalee comp, with Aluka as the main tank on the Maokai and just Janna for disengage. And they ran that very well against Invictus Game. It was actually the communication was good. Like, it was obviously a very measured performance, because, if you ever make a big mistake in a comp like that, you just lose, right? You make one bad fight and the team just overcomes you and you can't really team fight. But they did very, very well with that comp. And then they took the 2-0 moving tacts with kind of their more standard Corki rotational comp. So STYZ moving away from
Jinx,
from the hyper carries. The Jinx especially hasn't been working from most of the even his Caitlyn, actually, his most reliable champion, hasn't worked for him. But on Corki, like, focusing more on the Trinity Force rotations, when the communications are bored, as it was that series, and they took a game away from, I believe, Vici the next day. Vici the next day, like, it was Vici. It was against Vici, right. And it was a double AD comp again, so the Ezreal Kalista comp it was there, but Kalista going that traditional Infinity Edge, like static ship build rather than the Hurricane. So being able to kill the double front line of Jarvan, the Narvan combo of Jarvan and Gnar, like they do seem to run double AD well, but you do worry that, let's say the enemy team bans Nidalee, Rek'Sai, Ezreal, are they going to have the flexibility to have something good? They haven't necessarily had time to show it in the LPL, so I guess this weekend's game will be the best. They're going to play this weekend, obviously, before they head over to Katowice. Like, what World Elite we see this weekend, now that they've kind of shown an identity that they can build upon, is the big question, I think, for them. Yeah,
and is Ninja going to revert back to some of his off-meta picks like Anivia, which really haven't been very successful?
Let's not talk about the Cho'Gath. Please, no. But the Anivia, he's been playing it well, like, but the team doesn't seem to necessarily know how to translate that into like a comp that wins games.
And really, this team lives and dies by Spirit, because interestingly, when we came out in the beginning of the LPL, he was having incredible early games. I remember him just going 4-0 in the early game on champions like Rengar. Yeah, and his team just fell apart around him. They would leave him to die. The synergy wasn't there. They weren't protecting him properly or even following up on his engages, even though he would have a major advantage coming out of the jungle. And now finally, especially in these games, because you have to remember when he was playing against IG, he was jungling against Kakao, who's one of the best junglers of all time. And he was just completely dominating in a very interesting manner. And I think Spirit is actually playing, he's dimensionalized his play in a way that I didn't see on Samsung Blue. And maybe that was out of necessity because he is by far the best player on his team. But on Blue, he was good mechanically. And he had pretty good instincts, but he was never the level of control jungler that we think about when we think about Dandy and Cacao just choking the life out of you. And now, if you look at his play, when WE does well, it's because Spirit is putting out an insane amount of pressure on the map, getting into the enemy jungle, trying to 1v1 their junglers, just absolutely dictating the course and the tempo of the game. And so he's able, with champions like Diddley, where he can duel, and with champions like Rek'Sai, where he can find you in your jungle and then make plays around you, that's what's been successful. Now, if he can't do that, I would be very worried about what World Elite is going to do.
Yep, I think that's
because
fair.
They tend to get bodied in the laning phase. And I feel that because they're so vulnerable in the laning phase, if Spirit isn't all over the enemy jungler at all times, then the enemy jungler just kills all their laners.
And you worry about STYZ. Like, he's definitely been, of all the roster changes, like, even though it's not a star Korean name, this is a player that was built up as, you know, the next big Chinese AD carry, and he's really, really struggled this season. And UJ doesn't help him necessarily. Like, UJ's fine as a support, but like in the games that World Elite's lost to Vici, or like even in the laning phases, he just disrespected Vasily's Graves and like died a Graves burst at like level 6 or 7 randomly. Like, he wasn't. UJ's laning is definitely not helping STYZ, but at least if he moves towards the rotational carries, it opens up a playstyle that World Elite have shown they can do well with. But we have to, again, caution it. This is 3 days of play that they've actually shown. I mean, even 2 days. Like, they did go 0-2 in their first series of this
against
weekend.
King, yeah.
The communication, though, like, that was the issue in week 1, is that Spirit would be getting those kills, and like his communication with his support, like I believe it was Conan at the time, it just was non-existent. Like, they were the team. Like, that was one of the big storylines. Is okay, you've got amazing Korean players. How are they going to fit into the LPL? Or how are they going to fit into the mixed language rosters? World Elite were by far an example of the worst combination there. Like, they were all over the shop.
Do you imagine that the communication was like, Conan, what is good?
Well, like, it'd be weird. Like, Rengar would like
just let them pass by there. Keep going.
I mean, like, literally, it'd be like Rengar would go in and then his team wouldn't follow, or like his team, he'd go in and back out, and then his support would like follow, like flash forward to engage. Like, it was really obvious they were having massive communication issues.
So in essence, it seems like as we look into the build-up into IEM, that WE has actually found something that sort of works for them. But the issue is that it does appear at this juncture to be relatively easy to ban. Yep. And I agree with you that Nidalee, Rek'Sai, Ezreal are all very great bans to have against World Elite right now. And so that will probably be abused in the coming weekend of LPL. And so either World Elite shows something new and then maybe they're competitive at IEM, or they get countered by bans and people that draft against them or take away their preferred picks, and then they just, if there's that easy of a roadmap to beat them in LPL this weekend, then maybe they just roll over and die at IEM.
Okay, so
I think that's fair.
I noticed that PapaSmithy continues his trend of pronouncing Chinese things like a heathen Westerner. He still calls them World Elite. I like to respect cultures and the way they I call them Team WE. So I agree with the way these things are done, you know. Kobe didn't tell me that I have to call them World Elite, so I'm allowed to say what I like, actually, Papa, because it's not that hierarchy above me.
There's no
system.
Hierarchy.
No, there isn't. It's all jokes. It's all jokes.
You are correct. It is Team WE. It's just they were World Elite to me.
Okay. No, there will always be World Elite to me.
I've known them as World Elite since Warcraft 3 when Sky was playing for them. So.
And I like the discussion also about Team WE now, this particular lineup, because to me, I love it. It's one of the themes that I've always enjoyed about life. It's this Gnostic theme that the body is a prison for the spirit. And can the spirit be freed? Can it overcome? Can it actually exert itself into this world, being held down by this mass that is just filth? It's just, I don't actually even call them Team WE. My pet name for them is the Black Iron Prison. That's what I like to refer to them as, PapaSmithy.
I like to refer to them as the Spirit Maximum Security Penitentiary. It's a team that was specifically designed to imprison Spirit in the most brutal way possible.
And look, for 5 weeks, you are absolutely correct. But in week 6, they showed something. So we can be optimistic and hope that they're not. Look, if you have a power ranking for IEM, they have to be close to the bottom, but at least they showed something that they're not just going to be, hopefully, just a quick 0-2 and out of the tournament.
So let me ask you this then. I realize in this sense you haven't watched the Western Leagues much, so you can't talk much directly about TSM, but if we talk about the fact that they will play TSM in the first game of the group, okay, of their first game, when they play TSM, when Monty was describing it there, saying that, okay, they can have champions banned out against them, then their laning's questionable, and then if we look at individual players, we've got like Ninja, their mid lane has never been particularly touted as very good, their ID carry's having issues. How does this match them against TSM then? When people talk about TSM, they think strong laning, mid lane is a huge strength. How on that merit, if you accept my premise, would you match the two teams up?
I mean, both teams have an X-Factor player in Bjergsen and Spirit, like different roles, but like Spirit's the only one on WE that's shown that he can take over a game and actually lead his team to a victory. Like Ninja has gotten leads and then just not had the ability to close out games. Aluka at top, okay, he's an LPL former champion, but he's a role player at best, a decent tank player. And STYZ, he's had 2 carry performances in 24 games. Like, I feel like WE, at the moment, with the information that I have, are too strategically limited to be able to beat TSM. If they really are as limited, and look, maybe they'll show me up and have a massive weekend and show something new to their bow, but it's only been that recent resurgence that gives me any expectation they can.
That said, TSM is very reliant on, if they want to win, getting Bjergsen an advantage, and that frequently comes through Santorin's performance. And Santorin's never had to play against a jungler the caliber of Spirit. There is nothing anywhere close to that level of skill from the jungle position in North America. I mean, arguably Meteos, but even then Meteos is not at the same level of play or carry capacity in his current form.
Did you see the way, Monty, that when he talked about Aluka there, he just brushed off the guy winning an LPL title? Meanwhile, in another world, he's like, look at ClearLove's accomplishments. He's won this tournament, he's won that one. This is a champion, my friend.
Look at Aluka's performances when Name left his team on Positive Energy.
Listen, we all know Nami is a weak player. Like, you guys have overhyped him.
Like, Positive Energy in 2014.
You want to talk about hard carry fucking players and teams? That's a tournament right there, right?
Like 2014 Positive Energy, I don't even know what their record is, but it was like 2-20. Like, they were really, really awful. They had nothing going for them at all.
Even the final that they won over OMG was a 3-2. It wasn't like they bodied the whole league, It was narrow.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But to go from winning a league to like getting auto relegated that shows you how strong Positive Energy was without Name. And Aluka, he's okay. He can play Maokai, he can play tanks, he can play Sion. He's actually a notable Sion player in the LPL, but he's never going to be more than that, I don't think.
Monty, what do you think TSM versus WE? Who wins?
I give it an edge to. I give the edge to TSM for sure. Obviously, I think that they have more strategic flexibility, generally speaking, than WE does right now. WE really has to show something different this weekend and win with it in order to convince me that they're going to have a shot. That said,
one of your favorite
LPL is a significantly harder league than the NALC.
One of your favorite topics of discussion, Monty, on this show is Wild Turtle and positioning in teamfights. If STYZ dumpsters Wild Turtle, what would the feelings overcoming you be?
I guess validation, because it's so weird, because when I say that Bang hasn't had good position the last few weeks and that he's been dashing forward too aggressively and trying too hard to carry his team when it's unnecessary, nobody says anything. When I say Wild Turtle shouldn't be flashing forward in team fights, everybody loses their goddamn minds. Like, I've slandered the great leader, the great religious leader, Wild Turtle. That it's just absolutely ridiculous. And if we look at their games this last week, when TSM was busy losing to Team Liquid, we saw exactly that. Or not Team Liquid, rather, but Impulse. Because it was in these fights where Impact was playing this top lane Morgana, where he would walk into the river in front of Rek'Sai and eat a binding and then die. And that was the game that TSM was winning up until he was getting caught out. due to his poor positioning. So I mean, I don't even know what to say anymore.
Guys, I want a meme created. You know that famous meme of that character from The Big Lebowski that's played by John Goodman, and it's where he's got that gun that he's like pulling the back on, and it needs to be Monty's face, and it's saying like, "Am I the only one who thinks that Wild Turtle's goddamn prime ended a year ago?" Like that's like the meme right there. Okay, that's what we're going with here. So if we're going to talk about.
I don't think Turtle's bad. I just think Turtle needs to play to his position on that team, and that he needs to be much more mindful about his positioning and not just go crazy when he doesn't need to. There's no need for him to be playing the way he is right now. Just like there's no need for Bang to be playing the way he is.
So here's the concern. Here's the context that we need to ensure people understand here, PapaSmithy. GE Tigers might be the best team in the world. They're the best team from Korea.
Sure.
CJ Entus at least is top 4 at the moment in Korea. If you go over SK Gaming, perhaps the best team from Europe. TSM, perhaps the best team from NA. Cloud9, whatever, second best team. It's up to you how you rank it, okay? But these are top level teams from their regions. In that context, regionally, where is World Elite?
I'd say they are exactly where their ladder position shows them at the moment. They're 11th. I would say they're the 11th, joint 11th best team in the LPL with Energy Pacemaker.
You rate them not even a tier above EP?
Nope.
Okay.
They haven't deserved it.
All right, fair enough.
And remember, guys, there's only 10 teams in LCS, and they're the 11th in LPL. Now, here's the problem. Here's where I'm going to show you, once again, Monty, my ability to look on the bright side, to find good in even the most evil and bitter, cynical person. That's kind of what I've done in our relationship, you know? And to bring it out and to show the joy, that the joie de vivre that can exist, okay? I'm going to take this scenario and I'm going to set up the downside if you're an analyst for the game. The downside is a Westerner will see the name WE and they'll think World Elite, right? That used to be like one of the best teams. I've heard that they used to be like world champions. They'll see, okay, well, there's the best team from Korea's at this event, best team from Europe, best team from NA, and they'll think, you know, maybe this is one of the best Chinese teams. Then, when the games happen, this team that's an underdog, maybe they'll lose. Maybe TSM will beat them. Maybe they'll go out in the groups. And then the naive fan might say to himself, okay, TSM just beat one of the best Asian teams. You know, they knocked them out. A team that's formerly a champion of the world. They've beaten all these. That's the downside. That's what you're worried that'll happen. Okay, but here's the upside. Think of the other side, Monty. What if Team WE wins? Then, my friend, if Team WE wins, and then you're able to say, what you need to happen is, this is the order, this is the checklist, Monty. Step 1, Team WE wins against TSM. At that point, they can go out the tournament, it doesn't matter. They just have to win that one game. Step 2, we need Team WE to go back to China and just continue their form. Finish 11th. Step 3, we need TSM to win NALCS. And then step 4, the glorious tweet. After the victory, you give them 5 minutes. Let them enjoy their victory. You make the tweet. I guess if Team WE was in NALCS, they'd have won LCS. That's the upside, Monty. Believe that it can happen. Have faith in Wild Turtle.
It's a best of one if we talk about the format for this tournament. I don't think it's the best. I like the double round robin, but dual tournament isn't so bad. The best of one, at least there's double elimination, right? And you get some of the different matchups in there. So it's not optimal.
And you can still potentially, maybe it's possible you can play someone twice. So
yeah, it's
a little bit of leeway there.
Right. But best of one, you don't really learn a lot of from that, as we have known from the LCS format and from many other formats.
That shouldn't stop your snipes, though, Monty. Come on.
But I even if WE does take a game against TSM, I'd rather see it in a best of 3, which are going to be the semifinals, or the best of 5s, which are going to be the finals. But we'll see. I think it means more if a team doesn't make it. I think it's more indicative if a team doesn't make it out of groups, because you have a few chances in that case. Some teams will play 3 games and not make it out. One team will play 2 games and not make it out. So one team, because you have to go through the double elimination system. So,
I mean, you can just call the team by their name. Don't be rude. They're called Yowie Flash Wolves.
Probably. I actually haven't done enough research on Yowie right now to really discuss them in depth.
Well, we will discuss all the other teams now, but first we'll say goodbye to PapaSmithy. So, PapaSmithy, I don't know if you'll be on the World's desk, so this might be the last time that viewers of our show see you. Vaya con Dios, have a good life.
I appreciate that. Come watch LPL. It's all right.
Yeah,
That's
if
all
you want to
right.
watch LPL, go watch PapaSmithy. If you want to watch OPL, I mean, I can't even really relate to you. Like, are you even the same species as me? Like, I guess you could do that as well. I mean, if you want to hit yourself in the dick with a hammer, do that as well. I don't mind. But if you want to watch OPL, if you want to watch LPL, watch PapaSmithy. Follow him on
I
Twitter.
I appreciate you confirming OPL's existence. That's something.
It does exist. It does. So, just hang up the call now. Now that he's exited the scene, it's just the two of us again, we can talk about the rest of IEM. So we did the World Elite TSM matchup there. Let's stay in that group for a moment. This is the least stacked of the groups. The other matchup in that group is Gambit Gaming against CJ Entus. Oh man, Monty, this is awesome. You remember IEM Katowice 2013? It's like a rematch, man. You've got Gambit, who won that event, against CJ Entus Frost, who were like the reigning champions. It's just the same, my friend. It's just the same. It's a rematch.
Well, they
between
weren't the reigning champions at the time, but whatever.
No, they were. They hadn't finished the season at the time.
Oh, Sword hadn't finished? Okay.
Yeah. So it's not really a rematch. Let me just say that first of all. There's only 2 players on each team that remain, and let's face it, some of the players that are significant, like no Alexic for a start off, like. I'm sorry, I'm not going to allow anyone to tell me that when Betsy plays in this match, he is representing Gambit and Europe in a rematch between Frost and Gambit from fucking 2013. I'm not going to allow anyone to say that. I'm sorry. I know that's the narrative people will want to bring up, which, by the way, let me just throw one of my patented shots at Western casters out here, Monty. Last year, and listen, I'll just say this out straight up. Last year at IEM Katowice, there was a match between Gambit Gaming and Taipei Assassins. And the people who did the Western casting of that match need to sit the fuck down and stay in your motherfucking lane. Because you guys constantly referenced the history between Taipei Assassins and Moscow 5 from 2012 when they played each other in a way that didn't make any sense considering who was on the Taipei Assassins lineup for that tournament, which I believe was 1 player from that team. That is ridiculous. Come on. And saying stuff like acting as though this would be like, and let's see who wins when they match up now. And then when they won, that was the worst thing, Monty. Taipei Assassins won the first game, and they were like, well, I guess they just have Moscow 5's number. Like, shut your fucking... That doesn't even make sense. There's only 1 player there. What are you talking about? This is madness. I just wanted to throw that shot out there, Monty. Because I'm worried that that's going to happen in this one. Like, it's going to be like TSM versus World Elite. You know, they both played in the quarterfinals of Season 2 World Championship. Like, I don't want to... In fact, I think... Yeah, I can't handle it, okay? I just can't handle it, goddamn. Okay. I had to get that out there. But, okay, pulling back from that, when CJ Entus plays against Gambit, now, this is suddenly looking like it might actually be a fun game, Monty.
Well, it is, and I think it's important for people to know when we talk about CJ, they have done really well. Now, they just rolled over and died against SK Telecom in the last week of play, but part of that, what people don't know, is that CJ was actually moving gaming houses at the time, so they weren't able to practice. That said, they played badly even for not practicing. Coco seems to only have 4 champions he can play in the mid lane, which are Kassadin, Jace, Ezreal, and LeBlanc. So I'm concerned about their strategic versatility at the current point in time, and they just let SK Telecom have every single dragon in their last match. And this is a team that 2-0'd SKT earlier in the season, and they didn't even beat SKT with Faker. They beat EasyHoon SKT, or they lost to EasyHoon SKT 2-0. So that's, now, not to say EasyHoon played badly, because he played very well, especially on Cassiopeia, but it's still not the same level of challenge.
So how do they match up against a Gambit who is on this streak now? I think they've won something like, 7 or 8 games or something in a row?
I think they match up just fine, actually. I think that the European teams have shown major flaws, and in particular, Gambit, and we'll talk about SK in a little bit. Gambit has been really reliant on a lot of these AoE compositions, and they've been particularly reliant on Diamond's performance and his ability to outplay his counterpart. And while that may happen against Ambition, I do think that I'm not sure what will happen if Gambit has to play from behind. And I don't really foresee that as something that they're going to be able to pull out of and win, because it seems both in SK and in Gambit's situations, when they're not playing the power picks and they're not playing the bully, they both look very weak. So I think with proper research against Gambit and SK, teams will be doing quite well.
What's funny is people are billing this to use the old narrative as they want to see Edward play Mad Life. But actually the matchup I'm most excited to see is Shy versus Cabochard. because everyone is at the moment really riding the Kabashad bandwagon heavily because he's one of the reasons why they're winning.
Sure.
But I want to see him play versus Shy, a guy who's incredibly experienced, has played basically the who's who of the best top laners, and at the moment is having sort of a resurgence in terms of effectiveness in the game, and that's versus Koreans,
And not only that, but we've seen time and time again that his Mundo must be banned. Otherwise, he will just kill your entire backline. Even SK Telecom respecting him enough to take that champion out of the pool. So there are a lot of power picks here from CJ, and it's 100% true that if you let them get comfort picks, they can beat anybody. So you do have to prepare pretty specifically to play against them. Now, we haven't seen that versatility, but they do play Najin this coming week, so we may see more if they've had that time to practice, which they did legitimately lack in the last week of play.
And the thing is, okay, Kabashad, what you describe as his strength is he's a good 1v1 top laner, okay? That's one of his strengths. Well, if you take Shy off Mundo and you leave Aurelia open, oh my god. I hope that
Shy hasn't been playing Aurelia.
I would love to see him. Dude, I saw him play. Well, people will get mad at this, but did you see there's a video someone put on Reddit where he played a solo queue game on Aurelia and basically just like 1v9 the whole thing? I don't think he died once. He went like 17-0-9 or something, and just like was just unkillable basically.
I'm actually surprised they haven't been playing Aurelia, frankly.
You'd think it'd suit him.
Yeah, I don't really know what's going on with CJ's preparation. Obviously, they didn't have a lot of time to do it this past week, but I think that Shy definitely could break out, and I would prefer to see him on champions like Aurelia, but he just hasn't been given those pickups yet. His Lulu and his Mundo are still legitimately very dangerous, however, and his Rumble's okay too.
So, who do you? It sounds like you're edging that towards CJ. By how much?
I definitely give the edge to CJ. I think that the bottom of Europe that Gambit has been beating up is not particularly skilled, and I do think that if Diamond can't make a big impact in the game, that they will just get crushed. So I give it 70-30 CJ.
Yeah, I think I have CJ winning that as well. The problem is, the reason why I don't want CJ to win, why I want Gambit to win, is because I think TSM is going to beat World Elite. And so I want TSM to play against Gambit, okay? Because I'm just going to put this out there now. If Diamond utterly dumpsters Bjergsen, Santorin, and TSM, I might actually pass out from lack of blood flow to my brain. That's all I'm going to say, folks, there. I'll just create that mental image for you there. That's all I want, is to just see Diamond in God mode, unleashing the fury of Europe.
Diamond's playing really well right now, really well.
You know what? This is the part of the show, Monty, that people hate the most, is the part where you or I say that we told you so and like sort of crow over the fact that we know more than people. But people used to get so mad when I even suggested in season 4, not that Diamond was the best jungler anymore, but like don't just write him off completely. Like, it's not the end of his career now. He's not just never going to be relevant again. People were like, no, his time's passed. Like, he can't adapt to any of the new stuff. Well, who's leading the fucking meta again in the jungle? I think you could. Here's a bold claim for you here, Monty. I think because of Kakao and Dandy going to China, you could actually make a case that Diamond is in contention for the best jungler in the world again.
Maybe, but again, we'll see more. I want to see IEM before we make that argument.
Hey, listen, that's a pretty different from where he was in fucking summer.
That's true.
2014 though.
We still have,
and also
we still have players like Lee and Chaser in the world.
Okay,
so.
But here's the context as well, Monty. That's also in a world where no other non-Korean could have said that for a long time.
That is also true.
I mean, when Meteos was the best Westerner, or Shook was the best, no one could really have said like, "Oh,
I don't
they're
know
as good
if
as
Shook ever
Dandy and
was the
Kakao."
best Western jungler.
No, but they just say that, don't they? But the difference is that it wasn't a reasonable conversation to say, "Oh, let's compare Meteos to Kakao." It's like, shut up. No. Yes, he's very good, and he's in the top 10 or something, but we can't start comparing like directly and have the conversation last more than a minute, So, okay, that's the CJ group.
Also, I do want to point out that Gambit's team compositions recently have been pretty one-dimensional. Basically, it's Kabashard on an AoE CC top laner, Kennen or Morgana. And yes, he's done well in other champions, but in their last week, they played Tristana, Zed, and Sejuani both games. So their depth right now, they're really all about the AoE team fights, as it were. And so there are ways to deal with that in terms of split pushing or poke compositions. And I think one of the problems that Gambit will run into if all they can play is this AoE, unfortunately for them, CJ happens to be very good at playing double AD poke compositions, and they're very good at kiting. So Gambit will face a challenge to catch them, which they have not really faced before. I feel there's nobody in Europe who's that good at playing poke comps, so they're in for a pretty hard counter to what they're trying to do right now, if they do decide to go that route.
Okay, people are going to get mad at this because obviously Europe is famous for mid laners and still does have good mid laners, but I'm also really looking at how does this Betsy guy perform, because he's very inexperienced and he's going to be going against Coco, where if Coco plays lesser mid laners, he tends to dumpster them. So
This is true.
Betsy better be really top notch if he's going to survive this game. It's only a best of one, but even so. In a world where at some point in this bracket, you choose which, Gambit plays TSM, how do you see that match going, Monty? Do you still want NA fans? How do you see that going?
I see it going in favor of Gambit just because.
Oh boy, okay. Let me just put my feet up here. I've got a Arnold Palmer here. Like, time for my favorite part of the show. Let's go.
I think that they have more carry potential out of more positions.
Oh god! Let me just stop. I have to savor it, Monty. I have to soak it in. Gambit Gaming have got more carry potential out of more carry positions than TSM. Please explain.
Well, I think that Diamond can really counteract a lot of TSM's early game and laning strength, and I think that Cabashard has more carry potential than Dyrus in the top side. And I think both Pinoy and Wild Turtle like to play these reset champions to use the AoE on their team or the focus on Bjergsen in the case of TSM to easily clean up these team fights. But I just think Gambit is going to be stronger in lane across the board than most of their NA LCS opponents. So they're going to have, I think, a tough time if they had to play Gambit and deal with Diamond, who is just running rampant in Europe right now. Nobody seems to be able to stop him, even on champions like Sejuani that don't have the strongest early game. So Diamond's really in form right now, and I think that would be a major barrier to TSM doing well against them. But that's a pretty unlikely scenario.
No, they would probably face at some point.
Yeah, it's true. They could just face him. Yeah, they could just face in the lower bracket. I mean, I'd give the edge to Gambit. Maybe 60-40.
That's also another thing that I think goes for Diamond in that sense, Monty. Okay, his Nidalee, right? Well, everyone's using Nidalee at the moment. Everyone's abusing it. It seems a bit broken as a jungler, okay? Sejuani, Diamond's using really effectively, constantly. Who the fuck's doing that?
No one.
Yeah, no one. It's not like it's so broken everyone just picked it up. No, it's ridiculous. Everyone even saw him do it at the IEM and presumably tried it and was like, nah, I'm not using that, that's crap. And he just keeps using it and winning.
Well, it's good late game, that's for sure. It's amazing late game. It's just getting it there that only Diamond seems to be able to do effectively.
Now, when you were talking there about the threats on the team, is this another chapter in the disrespecting of Young Turtle? Co-authored by Monte Cristo. I wrote the opening paragraph to that, Monty, on Twitter once. Didn't have any repercussions. I'm loving what happened with that.
It's not a disrespected Turtle. I just think he should play more back. I think he is a mediocre AD carry that should be playing a cleanup or more reserve team fighting position and should be more cautious about.
Is Pinoy better than him?
I think I don't have enough information, I think, on Pinoy yet, honestly.
Okay. What he's saying there is he's not entirely confident enough to completely hang himself. He'd like to reserve at least some margin of error for after the IEM, please. Thank you.
I think Pinoy has benefited from Diamond's strength in the same way that Turtle has benefited from Santorin's strength, in that he's not receiving a lot of the focus in team fights. So in both cases, whether it's Turtle playing Jinx or Pinoy playing Tristana, these reset cleanup champions can work really, really well in their favor. So I put them in the same boat. I would say that Pinoy doesn't make as many positional errors as Turtle does. He's not going to walk into river first as many times or flash forward as aggressively in team fights when it's not optimal.
Let's go over into Group A, Monty. So in Group A, which is really stacked, like, I wouldn't even say that. I was going to say, if you wanted to, you can make a case that it has the best team from Europe, best team from NA, best team from Korea. But then people will be like, well, we all know which people would be like, Cloud9, spitting water everywhere. You know, so we won't say that. We'll just say as the SK Gaming plays Yowie Flash Wolves, first of all. Now, that's a bit of an underwhelming matchup. Well, not people from that region are like, it could happen, but SK Gaming play Yowie Flash Wolves. What do you think?
I haven't watched very much Flash Wolves since the last IEM, and if just from talking to some of the Taiwanese experts, it's my understanding that they overperformed a little bit during that tournament, although they have been improving since then. I will be doing more research on them, so I'm hesitant to kind of give an opinion on where I think their strengths and weaknesses are at the current time. I need to catch up a little bit on those games. As for SK, though, obviously they're 1-3 in their last 4, and taking a look at them, they haven't diversified their strategy at all. They pick bully picks in lanes, they push all the lanes, and if they get a lead, they crush you. But if they can't snowball towers into a significant advantage, then they look very weak. And I think that if teams start banning out their bully champions, or at least countering the lane pressure or responding with good wave clear, then we could see something different. Their game against Elements this last week, Elements, for whatever reason, picked Jinx, Orianna, Maokai, which is not the way to beat SK at the current time, because you're just sacrificing any kind of early game presence, and you're just liable to get rolled, which is exactly what happened. So that game aside, where I think that the planning was just incredibly poor from Elements, and not to mention the execution in Froggen's just god-awful Orianna build, I'm not even sure what was going on there, that SK is coming into this tournament from a position of weakness and from a position of being very easily read. So I actually think C9 and GE will get out of this group.
So that's going to be the other match there. Cloud9 plays GE Tigers. Now, we've already hyped up on other shows. Well, not hyped, actually, it was entirely accurate. Hype's actually an artificial construction. So we accurately described GE is the best team in the world. They're utterly dominant at the moment in Korea. No one can find an answer to them. How does Cloud9 possibly match up? I mean, listen, I give Cloud9 credit. They are a team that they're good at figuring things out, and they're good at adapting in the game. Can they do anything against GE Tigers?
No. I don't think anybody in this tournament can do anything against the GE Tigers. I was at the GE Tigers house the other day, and Gorilla was saying in an interview that their goal was to win this tournament without losing a game. So that's the attitude that they're going in with, and that's how confident they are against some of these opponents. And the GE does do... I think a lot of Korean teams in the past have been underprepared for international events. They've been too cavalier at times, and sometimes fail to do research on their opponents. But from having been in the GE house and observing, especially Nofe, their coach, and what he was doing while we were there, and his kind of extensive VOD reviewing, he wasn't reviewing at the time like teams for IEM, but he was definitely spending his time doing a lot of research on the scene. And so I would be confident that GE will not be cocky about this, that they're going to go in with a great deal of research. And you can really see that in terms of GE's pick and ban phases throughout the course of the season, because they have been so intelligent in how they play against their opponents, and they look like by far the best prepared team in the Korean League. And they constantly debut new picks. I mean, we saw them with their Victor last week, absolutely destroying the competition. They'll have a couple of matches
helping
this
to
week.
Ruin the meta entirely by doing stuff that you shouldn't get away with, that idiot teams will copy.
Yes, well, that's what they have been doing, right? Everybody else tries to copy their picks and can't quite make it work. So whether the Victor will come around and some other players will be able to play it successfully, we'll find out. Nobody has been able to pull off the way they use Kog'Maw yet, except for them, and it is really magnificent. So they have some pocket compositions that you just have to ban because you can't play it yourself, and they may come in with some wild stuff that we haven't seen before either. I think GE, there's not really it's a best of one. I mean, it could happen that Cloud9 wins, but GE's 90% on this, and it's hard to see how Cloud9 would get
I know
an
how you do
edge.
it, Monty. I know how you beat GE Tigers. You don't know yet. This is one of the areas where I'm ahead of the curve on you here, Monty. So
Oh boy.
you're thinking to yourself, well, like I described there, Thorin, like, they do the jugger more, that's unbeatable. If you try to take that away, you can't do it against them, so you can't really take those picks away, but those picks aren't even the best power picks. So if you take those away, they get the power picks, then they beat you that way. You can't
Yep.
beat them. I know how, because I saw it happen, Monty. All you have to do, it's very, very simple. Just to beat GE Tigers, you just have to have Faker on your team, have him get LeBlanc, and then he win. It's very easy to do. Now, the only problem I can see with that is, I know that Cloud9's like improving a lot, but it's going to be hard to get Faker onto their team, and it's going to get hard to get LeBlanc. So those are the only steps I can see in their way. But if they can do that, I think they have a chance personally.
Yeah, and Cloud9 too, it is worth noting that they're 7-1 in their last 8. They have been the best team in NA over the last 4 weeks of competition. They are looking very good by NA standards, and I would put them as at number 1 in terms of North American teams right now. Balls is back and team fighting well these days, but it's again, high against international mid laners has never been a great story of victory. And he does get exposed on his individual talent level at events like this. And the question is, who on Cloud9 is better than their counterparts? And the answer is no one. So Smeb is performing probably second only to Duke in terms of the top lane right now in Korea. Lee or Chaser, take your pick for the best jungler. Kuro, while he hasn't been as flashy as some of the other players, he's been incredibly consistent and with a huge champion pool. And then Cut Prey is statistically the best player in Korea right now, and has been performing amazingly. And Gorilla remains top tier. So where do you go, really? I don't know. I don't think that there's much of a hope for Cloud9.
And the biggest concern there is, okay, we've said a lot of nice things about Sneaky in the past, but he's playing a guy who at the moment might be like, okay, I won't say the best player in the world. Faker exists. Let's say the most efficient player in the world right now.
He's
His game impact
incredibly
is off the
efficient.
charts. Prey, the AD carry of GE Tigers.
Yeah,
How can
let me see
Sneaky
what-
match up against that?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, Prey is more capable of making plays than Sneaky is. Hold on, let me just check on stats real.
We see the Monte Cristo in his natural habitat. Okay, yeah. Anyway,
Let's check after last week how his stats changed, because he was number 1 in GPM, KDA, kills in the league.
Oh, so he's sort of like the Forgiven of Korea.
Oh, actually, EasyHoon is top, but EasyHoon hasn't played all the games. So he's second now, 10.2 to 10.5. He's got 428 GPM, and he is number 1 in terms of kills by 25, 117 to Bang's 92. So that's pretty darn impressive.
Isn't it also a concern in this respect? Okay, Sneaky is a good Western AD carry. He's legit, okay. Prey's the best at the moment in Korea in terms of AD carry.
Prey is maybe the best AD carry in the world right now.
The thing that's concerning to me is that this bot lane for GE is particularly strong, whereas actually one of the weak points in NA hasn't just been high when he's had his problems, it's been elimination a bit. I think he's one of the guys who's had his problems as well this season. So the bot lane as a whole, if they're going to go 2v2, I could see there being problems there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Smeb has been an amazing force in the top lane too. It's really hard to find. There hasn't been a major flaw that GE has exposed. They've only lost 2 games. One of those games was when they allowed Faker, the best player of all time, on his best champion, which everybody else is smart enough to ban. I don't even know why they left that up. So that was a flaw in their pick and ban as well.
Because Monty, they can't be beaten as long as they don't have him on LeBlanc. So listen, give the fans a show. Are you not entertained? And then they just banned it and then wrecked him anyway and won the series.
So they're the Roman, the bread and circuses.
Well, you remember in that movie,
what
Monty, what he told him after he did the Are You Entertained and threw that sword in him, he told him, like, listen, like, don't just kill the people quickly, you got to give them a show, you've got to make an entertainment of it. That's what GE Tigers were doing there. Like, they understood the old gladiators message there.
You got it. Well, and then the other game they lost was to Jin Air, and Jin Air is a team that is very refined in the late game. So it's really hard to see how anybody's going to be able to take them down here.
So there's the two games, first of all. So now let's hypothetically match some other teams up. You've just suggested that you probably think Cloud9 will beat SK.
I do think Cloud9 will beat SK.
Why?
Because I think that Cloud9 is very smart when it comes to their pick and ban phase, and like I said, I think that SK is really reliant on playing a lot of these lane bully type champions and snowballing an early lead. And we've seen 3 out of 4 times in the last 2 weeks in Europe that when they can't do that, they look very weak. So their strategy is very one-dimensional right now, and I don't really see them fixing that before the next week of play. So I think as long as Cloud9 comes in with a plan of having good wave clear, that they're going to come out and do very well in the late game. But it is one game. Again, Forgiven can go off in one game. That's true.
That's my big concern if Cloud9 plays SK is that, listen, everyone knows I like Cloud9. I love their style of play. I've got a lot of respect for it. But when I remember back when they played the IEM San Jose, when they were looking fantastic, well, that series they had against Alliance has been really overlooked by people because people see that they won the tournament and they say, oh, yeah, what happened was Cloud9 just dumpstered Alliance and then won the whole tournament. No, that was a competitive series. That was a series where they could have lost that series, actually. The third game, they were behind until they turned it around. And actually, one of the key things that was costing them being able to dominate the series was their team fighting. Actually, Alliance was out team fighting them a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah.
But now in a world where... Yeah, okay.
That was also at a point where I think Balls was in a slump, just as he was in the first part of this season, and I think the Balls team fight has gotten back to where it used to be.
Yeah, but Sneaky was also playing out of his mind.
Okay, I personally think I was actually pretty disappointed in Cloud9's overall performance at San Jose. I think that they didn't display very good team fighting at all, especially in the mid and late game. I think they're doing much better in that regard currently.
So here's the thing, though. When you watched that series, that was one of the first moments I really nailed down the problems that Reckless sometimes has, where he had fights that he could have helped turn and win, and it would be a closely contested fight, but he would just exit the fight and wouldn't do maximum damage. Now, what's interesting is Forgiven actually basically does what Reckless would tell you he does. Reckless would tell you, right, I look for safe spots and the right time to be aggressive, and when it's not the right time, I get out. The difference is Reckless airs too much on the getting out and not taking the right chances. Forgiven's actually really good at timing when to go in. Like, if you look at the damage totals in Europe, Forgiven isn't number one, but he's the one he's almost never dying. He almost never dies. He goes in. If he goes in, it's going to be kills. And if he gets out, it was the right time to get out. So I think that he can be the X factor to win XK the game.
His judgments are really good. I'm not super confident about this. It's interesting because I do believe it's a challenge between Forgiven's playmaking ability versus the superior strategy from Cloud9, but I'd only call this like 55-45 Cloud9.
Because the thing is, I am leaning towards Cloud9. The reason why I say that is because even though I think like Forgiven can win them the game, I always hesitate, if you've noticed my trend, to ever give anyone credit for something before they've done it. So I haven't seen SK do anything internationally yet. For all I know, maybe some of those players don't play as well as they do in Europe, whereas Cloud9 are a given quantity at this point in time. I know what I'm going to get from them. I know the level they're going to bring and how they're going to play. So if I had to bet my life on it, well, they're the more clutch team, so I'll go with Cloud9 for that win, even though I think SK could win.
Yeah,
okay.
I think they could, but especially, like I said, in a best of one situation, if it was a best of 5, I would weight Cloud9 more heavily because I think that they can react to strategies better, but there's always that one game where Forgiven just goes nuts and kills your entire team. So that's the consideration in the best of one format to be aware of, I think.
If SK Gaming played against GE Tigers.
Oh my God, no, they're going to get bodied.
Why?
Because SK I think Prey's positioning is too good, and I think that SK is overly reliant on N-rated and champions like Annie, and N-rated is not the best mechanical player, and I think they're just going to run circles around SK's initiation, and SK is just simply not going to be able to win lane convincingly against these players.
This is one of those moments, Monty, where I understand why Western fans get so disappointed by international tournaments. If you remember my kind of preamble to Worlds after Alliance had won the summer split, was I told you, listen, at Worlds, I can tell you one thing: Froggen will not choke. Like, if I'd look at the history of Froggen, you could very rarely ever find bad games he ever had. And I'd argue at Worlds, actually, aside from the loss to Kaboom, he was actually very solid overall. He did quite well. But the Kaboom one, obviously, that was a tilt fest. It was really bad. So it makes you feel disappointed. Like, essentially, you're looking at the best of what the person from your region could bring, and then you see them at Worlds or internationally, and they don't always live up to that, okay? And so, likewise, we all wanted to see what would happen when Meteos came in with the first Cloud9 lineup. What would he do internationally? Could he match up against these top teams? And it actually went fairly poorly, and it went fairly poorly at IEM Cologne. In this sense, there's a part of me is still holding out some hope that Forgiven turns out to be legit. He is the savior of the West, and he's going to come in there with this carry mentality, and he's just going to hard carry the whole group, and he's just going to body the whole thing. There's still a part of me can't give it up until...
I want that to happen.
Until he's dead, until William Wallace is drawn and quartered on that table, I believe in freedom money. I believe it could happen. I have to.
I too want to believe in Western esports Jesus.
And then I also want him to trash talk.
The coming of the Messiah
once he wins, you know.
Yet.
Once he wins, I want the trash talk. I want him to be like, well, you know, you can say that. Well, actually, I was doing Wicked there, so I can't even really do Forgiven. I want it to be something like, either you beat SK or you suck a cock, pray. That would be like, that would be the Forgiven quote, I guess. So anyway, I think that's all the matchups in Group A we did there. Let me think. Yeah, we did. Okay, so you've already spoiled it by saying that you think that GE and Cloud9 get out of the group, and we know you had CJ and TSM from the other group, which leaves.
No.
Oh no! Didn't you say Gambit would beat TSM?
I don't know. I mean, I did say that. So I guess CJ. I would give it to CJ and Gambit, I suppose. Okay. But I think that's really hard to call the Gambit TSM.
Monte TSM salty confirmed hater. Okay, so going into our world of the semi-finals now. Semi-finals is listen, I don't work for this company, so I don't give a fuck. I don't really like best of 3 semi-finals. It kind of bums me out. Like if I see like for example, let's say it is TSM versus GE Tigers. I mean, jokes aside, I'd like that to be a best of 5. Like, yeah. Anyway, no, but for real, like, but actually for real reasons, not just for enjoying the destruction of something beautiful. Much like that scene from Fight Club. Yeah. TSM is my Jared Leto. Except that actually, Monty, much like that movie, I think I'm watching someone beat the fuck out of him. It's actually me. And actually, that's the wrong way around. It was him originally anyway. Fuck that anyway. I just basically want to do that, to destroy TSM single-handedly with my own bare hands. That's been my mission goal from day one, you know. So, but if that was to happen in the semi-finals, that's a bit underwhelming, actually. Now, if we think about how the groups would come out, did you have CJ beating TSM?
Yeah.
Okay, so that means your semi-final would be GE versus versus Gambit,
or GE versus TSM.
Okay,
yeah, one of those two.
So GE versus Gambit,
or maybe maybe in the wild world where World Elite fixes their problems and displays increasing competency this next week. Maybe World Elite, but
I don't live in that world, so okay.
I'm pretty sure I don't either. But
now, if Gambit play GE Tigers. Now, I'll warn you, Edward watches this show. Now, if GE Tigers plays Gambit in a best of 3, what do you think happens?
They get destroyed.
GE Tigers does, because Gambit win all the IEMs, and yeah, I agree. I'm with you, Monty. This is Gambit back at their best.
See, sometimes the best of 3 format is merciful because the agony is not prolonged, right? Wouldn't you want a quick and easy death?
See, this is the thing, Monty. It's true. What's going to be great about this IEM is that Gambit was so great at IEMs in the past. And so what we're going to do is we're going to celebrate that by seeing the disparity between where they were when they were great and they could beat the best Korean team and where they are now when they can't possibly beat the best Korean team. And when we see them not beat the best Korean team now, we'll appreciate how truly incredible it was in the past that they could. That magical lineup, I'll make that point again, Gambit fans, that magical lineup, not this lineup, that's different. It was the magical lineup. The magic goes away when the lineup's not there. Have I explicated this enough for you? When that faces the best Korean team now, you'll realise why that was so special back then. And NA fans will still be salty that they never had the team that could do that. But enough about that. So in another world, in the other semi-final, we would have Cloud9.
By the way, Gambit is the only European, the only Western team to ever beat a Korean team in a best-of series? That's true statement.
Because CLGEU beat Najin Sword in that semi-final.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. That's true. And they did in Korea in the very early days of League of Legends, that is true. In the last 2 years, though, Gambit is the only team to have beaten a Korean team in a best-of series. And an NA team has never, ever done it.
Yep. So anyway, in the other semi-final, we would have CJ versus Cloud9. Now that's a fucking great game right there.
I think actually that could be very entertaining.
I know. See, I can already see the wheels turning there. You're back in full All-Star Monte Cristo mode. You want to say that Cloud9's going to win that series?
No, I don't actually think they will. Okay. I think Coco is way too much for Hai to handle.
So I've overestimated your love for Cloud9 and NA with your love for the Coco.
That's right.
Okay. I made a classic mistake there, Monty. I didn't follow the meme. Always follow the memes. They'll lead you to where it is. You know, like follow the money? That's what you do in esports. You follow the memes. They'll lead you to the truth. What are the chances if they match up those two teams? Cloud9 versus CJ. Because here's the thing. I don't think Space is going to go crazy and completely dumpster sneaky. I think that's
I don't think that either. I'd be much more worried about the solo lanes with Shy, and it's always about Hai. Like that's the weird Hai. The Hai predicament is that he is a world-class shot caller, very intelligent in terms of his strategy on the fly, but he can't do that level of shot calling and compete against top-tier international mids. It's never worked.
And here's the problem as well, Monty. There's no champion pool overlap. As in, if you, CJ, if you really want to, if you watch this show now, ban Zed and Fizz, there you go, cheers, enjoy the match. Like, Coco's not going to play them anyway, doesthink matter. You could literally ban them all.
Really true.
I mean, what else can Hai play? What would he be good on, do you think? What's his best chance?
I think his best chance is Zed because he's able to actually make intelligent split-pushing decisions, but I'd be surprised if they let him have it.
Well, I mean, we say that, Najin Shield let him have it, but yeah, you never know how these teams are going to do these things, do you? In fact, maybe they had a gentleman's agreement, Monty, because if you remember, they gave Gogoing it in one game, so they were like, well, one good turn deserves another. Now, sir, you may have the Zed and have a chance to beat us now. Maybe there was a gentleman's agreement there, I don't know.
I think that must have been it. That's too funny. But yeah, I'm not entirely confident on Hai. I mean, looking at his pickups this season, he's 100% on Zed so far, but played a couple games Cassid, a couple games of LeBlanc. You can't leave LeBlanc up. That's the only Cassid and LeBlanc, both he and Coco play, but Coco's going to be much better and much more impactful on either of those champions. And other than that, I don't see there being. I
mean, there's the worry, right? Is that if like you're saying, you have to ban Shy's Mundo. Well, then you're going to leave open at least one good Coco champion there. At least.
Yep.
So exactly. You're essentially saying Coco beat us.
That's the story, though, right? That has been Cloud9's downfall is Hai dying 12 times in a game on Talon. He can't hold it together in terms of his individual play. Cloud9's great at playing from behind, and they're great at outthinking you in terms of map pressure, but it's just not quite enough. You fall too far behind, and even that excellent poise can't bring you back.
So just to entirely tempt fate, you know, people will pick up anything that we say wrong and use it against us in the future. It's pretty hard to predict a game. We're now dry running an entire fucking tournament, having to have like 17 results happen for our predictions to be right.
Yeah. By the way, I have never been wrong in the last two World Championships since I've been a professional analyst.
Of the champion, you mean? Yeah.
Of the World Champion before the tournament started.
Okay. Because you have to be careful there. I've never been wrong in the last 2 years. It's not a phrase you want to say now, Monty. Like,
No.
There's evidence that could be brought forwards that would be damning. So if we continue to dry run it, we're now going to end up in a world where GE Tigers plays CJ. So this literally now everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, I see what you've done there, Monty. The circle jerk continues. The Korean team's all in the fight. Okay, son. Yeah, all right.
Hey, man, I wish EDG was going to be there, so this would have been a more interesting tournament. But
here's the problem. If it's a best of 5 between GE Tigers and CJ Entus,
CJ doesn't have enough strategic versatility. GE is way too strong and way more versatile and surprising. And they convincingly beat CJ in their last showing simply by deleting Coco's champion pool and baiting them into AoE picks when they were playing a highly mobile pick composition in game 2. It's a beautiful draft, and I have no reason to believe that same exact thing won't happen again.
See, here's the thing. When you said that comment that Gorilla said about how they don't think they're going to aim to not even lose a game, first of all, I got worried because I thought, like, oh no, that's like the dandy statement. Like, what if they lose a game? What'll go wrong? But then I thought to myself, Oh no, there's a positive to that. Maybe it's like, when KT Bullets came to the same tournament last year, they didn't lose a game, they beat everyone, and then Rio was stood on that stage, he was holding that trophy, that smile that went across his face, Monty, we never saw the smile. He was thinking to himself, you know what, things have been going badly in Masters, we'd lost every game, maybe it's going to turn around. Maybe, you know what, maybe this is my time. Maybe now that Faker's dropped off an SK Cup, maybe this is the Ryu era. This is probably the beginning of a great period of my career. He now plays on H2K in Europe.
After his horrendous stint as a jungler, yes.
Oh,
Dark
by the way,
days
we're not going to talk much about LCS now because we can talk in later weeks, but Ryu's his demise has been greatly exaggerated, Monty. The dude was like 3rd in Europe recently. Fucking H2K.
Yeah, he's doing really well too. He's definitely come around.
Okay, so we pretty much run through IEM there. If you had to pick one matchup, maybe it can be a matchup we haven't talked about yet. What would, on paper, be the most exciting matchup in the whole tournament that you could create? Which one would you pick?
I'm really hoping that TSM and Gambit play each other. I think that could be a very exciting, even matchup.
And the potential to just draw salt from either direction is just crazy for that game.
That's right. So there are going to be a bunch of people getting really mad.
Yeah, it's impossible for it not to happen.
The humor.
Yeah. And also, by the way, no matter here's the thing about fans, okay, Monty. Fans you'd think would be the people who would celebrate and enjoy the good things in the game. No, fans are the ones who ruin things the most. Because say that game was the best game of League of Legends ever played, and it was the closest with the most high level back and forth play. Do you know what the people who were the fans of the team that won would say? Oh, they fucking dumpstered him. They shit. You wrecked you. Shit. It's like, that's how you ruin things if you're a fan. Like, don't do that for fuck's sake. That's just gross.
But please do make hilarious collages about people getting mad.
We want collages and use old photos of people. In fact, here's one for you.
Take hilarious quotes out of context, please.
Here's a great meme I can already create that hasn't happened yet. If Diamond dumpsters TSM and beats Santorin, since Santorin was kind of a nobody in Europe, I want someone to recreate the Diamond Proc streaming thing of him saying like Santorin, and then he looks on Gamepedia, Esportpedia, and he actually doesn't realize that Santorin's from Europe. He just sees that he's on TSM and he says NA, goodbye, and then closes it down. Like, I want that to be the meme because it's so meta on so many levels that it would be fantastic. And it also hurt Santorin's feelings a little bit, so it's got everything I like, it touches all bases there. Let's pick another match though. So that's like the filthy casual, just enjoy the matchup of like, could be action and intensity. What would be like the Monte Cristo most boring possible game of perfection and execution matchup? Which one would that be, Monty? Which would fulfill your dark needs? I mean, we're going to make like a 50 Shades of Monty, and you're like, I have my playroom over there. I have certain different, like, whatever that thing is. And they're like, oh my God, what does he mean? And then you walk in, it's just like, don't go for kills. Rotate slowly around the map. Only take towers. Like, you're perverted. This is S&M. Like, what? How could you take pleasure from this? Like, what would be that game for you in this tournament, Monty? What matchup could we create?
I don't think there is a game.
Come on, it's got to be SKC9, surely. Lane swaps, shot calling.
Maybe, but SK isn't diverse enough, and they're too ham-fisted for me.
SK is ham-fisted.
Yeah, they are right now.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we've got you on record there. SK is ham-fisted. That's going to be on the collage, Monty, if SK beats Cloud9 now. SK is too ham-fisted. That'll be your picture of you like that.
Don't go into a game playing full press lanes and Zed and Graves and pushing Morgana and tell me that that's not ham-fisted. But whatever.
We've actually both now been used on those like meme collages afterwards. Because you remember I got put on the one where KT Arrows won, where it was me saying all this shit from that episode about an obvious joke about Kakao having to become a streamer or something. Like, I was on like the bottom left-hand corner of one of those. Also, a little piece of trivia here. I won't go into great detail here, but there's a famous Wikipedia sort of site in Korea, okay, that has all this interesting information on different players in history. And so I had a friend of mine who understands Korean look up some of this stuff for me, and then he actually found an entry for Thorin. There's an entry about esports personalities, Monty. There's a part about you being like Monty Kim and stuff. Then there's a part about Thorin, who they call Sorin. That's apparently the way like you say it in Korean or something. And the whole thing is just about me and Reginald, me in Poland, and then about the fact that I just say things like that. They mentioned the Kakao thing that I said Kakao would be a streamer email like, so if they go on there, I'm gonna look fucking terrible, Monty. It's not even like a good shit about me. Oh, and there's also a whole section, Monty. You'd think like the one good part. There's a whole section about how I'm like a flame fanboy and how I never blame him for anything that CJ ever did wrong. And then it links to my interview. So yeah, cheers. I'm even hated in the Korean scene as well. Like, what the fuck? And I had to find this disrespect out through a translator, for fuck's sake. I didn't even know this existed. So yeah, anyway, I think we've wrapped up the whole IEM tournament there. Are you actually going to be at the IEM, Monty? Is this officially announced?
What?
Are you going to be at IEM?
I can neither confirm nor deny my existence.
Well, I don't know whether you are or not. I know I'm not going to be at IEM, and so on that note, everyone subscribe and all the good stuff, and we'll see you next time.